Chapter 392. This, Yatsuki's Golden Heron. ISC Grand Shrine's priest, Shinto's leader, Takehara Miyagi, disappeared just like that. Looking at the disastrous scene on the screen, the other 10 night crows in the meeting room were so shocked that their scalps went numb. They couldn't say a word. Originally, everyone thought that Rue Huey's actions of ignoring Yatsuki's rules would be severely punished, especially since the other 2 golden herons would definitely not sit by and do nothing. However, on the day Rue Hui was crowned as the golden heron, another golden heron, who was about to punish her, disappeared along with the symbol of the Shinto, the ISC Grand Shrine. 7 to 8 missiles flew from afar with smoke and landed around ISC Grand Shrine, razing the entire area to the ground. Takehara Miyagi didn't expect Kaneshiro Rue Hui to be so ruthless and have such ability. Launching 7 to 8 missiles at once wasn't something an ordinary faction could do. Even a faction like the Kamiyoshi clan wouldn't be able to launch so many missiles at once. It wasn't just a matter of money. Of course, Rue Hui didn't just rely on the Kamiyoshi clan's power. She also had the head of the Tenmu Group's weapons department standing beside her. Those 7 to 8 missiles were launched under Ryudo's orders. After all, as the head of the weapons department, he had the authority to mobilize a huge arsenal. So as long as Ryudo was willing, he could even arrange a Lee May barbecue for Tokyo. Of course, there was no need to do so for now. Just as the night crows in the meeting room were shocked by what they saw, Rue Hui slowly opened her mouth and said, "Everyone, Takehara Miyagi was attacked by unknown villains and died. It is the misfortune of Yatsuki." Unknown villains? I clearly saw the young man beside you press the launch button. Although Rue Huey's words sounded serious, they sounded quite sincere. But the people in the meeting room naturally didn't believe a single word. After all, Ryudo pressed the launch button in front of them. But whether they believed it or not, it didn't matter. More importantly, the golden heron Takehara Miya was already dead, and he died under the bombardment of a heavy missile. This was a completely different story altogether. Previously, the assassination of Golden Heron Iwasaki Anasuk could be attributed to Rue Huey's underhanded methods. But this time, in front of all the night crows, he directly fired a missile and blew up the Takehara Temple together with the ISC Grand Shrine. This was no longer a matter of despicable means, but a matter of how terrifying Rue Huey's forces were. To be able to fire missiles without restraint in this land, this in itself represented a huge amount of authority. This kind of authority was above the Japanese government. They could even stand on the heads of the bowing party and shit on them. After that, they could even ask them for toilet paper. Therefore, when Rue Hui expressed that she would temporarily be in charge of the Takehara Temple, and at the same time be in charge of the 2 golden herons, the others could only remain silent, not daring to say a word. Unknowingly, the way they looked at Rue Hui became a lot more submissive, and the angle of their heads was lowered as much as possible, as if they were meeting with their superior. But this kind of thing was natural. After all, the Yamato people were such a race. When you were stronger than them, they would not accept it and prepare to bite you. But if you were stronger than them, they would kneel at your feet and beg for your protection. The current Rue Hui was in such a state. Her strength was much higher than the other night crows. She didn't even have to worry about the golden herons, and she could kill them as she pleased. Such a woman, no one dared to say anything to her, and they all expressed their sincere congratulations, congratulating Rue Hui for being promoted to the position of golden heron. With Rue Hui-sama, the development of the Yatsuki will naturally become better and better. The heavens are really blessing Japan. Indeed, Rue Hui-sama is a heroine. I admire you. If Lady Rue Hui has any orders, we will definitely follow her lead and obey. At the end of the meeting, the surrounding night crows scrambled to curry favor with Rue Hui. From their enthusiasm, those who didn't know would think that this group of people had a good relationship with Rue Hui. In fact, just 10 minutes ago, they were still thinking about how to kill the leader of the Kamiyoshi tribe. Only 10 minutes had passed, and everything had changed. This was the benefit of having a bigger fist. After all, the current Yatsuki was actually an imperfect organization. In the previous triangle of army, government, and religion, without the army, the merchants who were added in were simply a bunch of mud that could not be supported by the wall. They could not form a three-legged complementary posture at all. The habit of merchants was to seek profit and avoid risk, so when faced with the threat of extreme violence, they would only change sides faster than anyone else, just like now. These fellows actually changed their faces so quickly. I really can't help but admire their shamelessness. After the group of night crows left with happy smiles, Ryudo, who was standing next to Rue Hui, couldn't help but ridicule. So they can only be merchants forever, never able to do anything big. Speaking of this, Rue Hui couldn't help but stand up and stretch. Obviously, sitting there for a long time made her body a bit stiff. With this stretch, Rue Hui's proud figure was fully displayed. Compared to Iam's slender figure, Rue Hui was not as tall, and at the same time, she was more voluptuous with the mature charm of an elegant lady. Especially because she had given birth to the colored glaze. Some parts related to birth were more obvious than Iam's. This almost made Ryudo's eyes stop. No, how can I have such thoughts about Mrs. Rue Hui? I shouldn't have. During this period of time, Rue Hui was very good to Ryudo and was very close to him. Whether it was Ryudo's amazing charm, the same age as the colored glaze, or if she wanted to inquire about Iam through Ryudo. In short, the relationship between Rue Hui and Ryudo was getting closer and closer, more and more like a sister and a brother. Although the actual age difference between the two was not that of a sister and a brother, in terms of appearance and mentality, they were similar. Well, okay, let's go back first. It's not comfortable to stay here. After dealing with the remaining work, Rue Hui was ready to take Ryudo back to the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. Under Rue Hui's manipulation, Iwasaki Yanasuk's property was now annexed by the Kamiyoshi, and this mansion was also their property. But even so, this was still Iwasaki Yanasuk's house, and Rue Hui felt a little strange staying here. Not long after, the two of them walked down the stairs from the conference room upstairs and came to the morning hall on the first floor. Because Iwasaki Yanasuk had just passed away, his body was still placed in the morning hall, and a large photo hung behind him. It looked very festive. In the morning hall sat the relatives of the Iwasaki family, and Iwasaki's daughter, Riko, was kneeling in front of the coffin. Iwasaki Riko was how should she put it, a woman with a very bold figure. She was wearing a black mourning dress, as if it was a big, black bun. Coupled with a strange expression on her face, it was really hard to imagine that this was the dignified lady, Iwasaki. After seeing Rue Hui and Ryudo coming down, Iwasaki Riko narrowed her eyes, which were so small that they were almost invisible, and stood up after taking a deep breath. She came in front of Rue Hui and said in an angry tone, "Kamishiro Rue Hui, my father is dead. Are you satisfied now? You have my condolences." Facing this orphan of the Iwasaki family, Rue Hui just nodded lightly and planned to go around her. Rue Hui was very clear that the things she had done would inevitably cause people to resent her. However, if he had to constantly consider the feelings of those who were being schemed against, then he wouldn't need to do anything. However, Riko obviously didn't intend to let Rue Hui leave just like that. She hurriedly blocked the door and shouted, "Wait. Don't think about leaving just like that. I want you to pay for what you did." Facing this lady's threat, Rue Hui just raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Then how do you plan to make me pay?" Before she finished speaking, Ryudo's figure blocked in front of Rue Hui and stared at Riko with a vigilant gaze. The current Ryudo's strength was already very terrifying. Under the premise of having LV5 physique, he also bought a lot of skill books, and his skill bar was already full. It was no exaggeration to say that even if there were 70 or 80 people who wanted to kill Rue Hui, as long as Ryudo was present, they wouldn't be able to hurt Rue Hui. "I'm going to drag you to hell with me." But in the next moment, Iwasaki Riko suddenly took out a red detonation switch and wanted to press it without hesitation. However, this woman's speed was a bit slow. The moment he reacted, Ryudo immediately kicked Riko's wrist and kicked the detonation switch away. If you want to detonate the bomb, you have to detonate it quietly from afar. Why are you shouting in front of others? After picking up the detonation switch, Ryudo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But before he finished laughing, in a building not far away, a woman who looked graceful and elegant also showed a happy smile. You're right, Ryuto Kiryo, Kaneshiro, Ruehei. This is how you detonate the bomb. Farewell. After seeing Ruehei and Ryuto appear through the binoculars, the woman standing on the balcony, Koda, and Tana, pressed the detonation switch in their hands at the same time. Boom! In the next moment, there was a violent roar around the Iwasaki mansion. In an instant, the pillars of the mansion were directly blown apart. The entire ceiling immediately fell down. There was no doubt that this was a carefully planned explosion. The person who placed the bomb was very professional, ensuring that everyone in the mansion would be buried as quickly as possible after the bomb was detonated. What? Because everything happened too quickly. The people in the hall on the first floor almost didn't have time to react before they were drowned by the falling rubble. Except for the body of Iwasaki Yanasuke, his daughter Riko and the relatives in the hall were all cooked in the explosion. They were almost all crushed into meat paste. Beautiful, as expected of the professional explosives team sent from the American base. Blowing up a building like this is like playing a game. Watching the Iwasaki mansion quickly collapse after the earth-shattering explosion, Koda and Tana nodded slightly on the balcony not far away. It was hard to imagine that the woman who arranged the explosion just now was actually the daughter-in-law of the Nippon imperial family, the wife of the current Emperor Itoku, Koda, and Tana. But as far as Kawada and her superiors were concerned, Rui Kanzaki had indeed gone overboard recently. That woman even seemed to want to take over the entire country. How could the Empress possibly tolerate this? You can only blame yourself for being too arrogant. How dare you come to Iwasaki Yanasuke's mansion to hold a meeting? Now, you can go accompany that man in hell. After taking one last glance at the rapidly collapsing mansion that had turned into ruins, Koda and Tana left the balcony with a sneer. She got into a car and walked toward her Kokyo. No one expected that such an explosion would suddenly occur in the Iwasaki mansion. Moreover, this kind of very professional bomb placement could quickly blow up all the pillars of the entire building, causing it to collapse at the fastest speed. So logically speaking, the moment the bomb detonated, the people who were still inside would definitely not be able to survive. The construction materials weighing hundreds of tons would directly crush all the people inside into meat paste, unless someone could quickly find a blind spot and hide in it. However, for Rui Kanzaki, who was almost directly knocked out by the explosion just now, when she woke up, she couldn't even determine whether she was alive or dead for a while. Darkness, thick darkness, shrouded the surroundings. The surrounding space was pitch black. Rui Kanzaki only felt that her head and body were leaning on a soft cushion, and there was a burst of dust in her nose. Am I dead? After opening her eyes, Rui Kanzaki subconsciously reached out as if she wanted to grab the darkness in front of her. But the moment she said that, a warm hand stretched out and held Rui Kanzaki's hand. Don't worry, Mrs. Rui Kanzaki. Although it's a bit difficult, we seem to be alive. In this dark underground world, Ryudo, who was sitting next to Rui Kanzaki, held her hand and said in a somewhat bitter tone. Chapter 393. For the current situation, Ryudo also felt a little helpless. He clearly kicked the detonator of Iwasaki Reiko, but the Iwasaki mansion still exploded. And that explosion, it was obviously the work of a professional. Almost at the moment when the bomb exploded, the entire mansion immediately collapsed. At that time, there was a large chandelier above Rueihui's head, and it was about to crush her into a meat paste. At this time, Rueihui scattered the two guardian ninjas, Ramaru and Ritsuki, to monitor the outside of the mansion, and to monitor the night crows who had just left. so only Ryudo was around. Of course, now Ryudo's strength is not weaker than Ramuru, and he can protect Rue Hui in most cases. So at that moment, he quickly rushed over and hugged Mrs. Rue Hui in his arms, dodged the chandelier, and rushed out. But it was too late. The time was too short. In the blink of an eye, the door was blocked by the debris of the building. TCH. At that time, Ryudo, who realized that it was too late to take Rue Hui out of the door, immediately made the appropriate response. He immediately rushed toward the corner of the stairs, which was a triangular gap between the stairs and the wall. In such a gap, even if the ceiling and other buildings above them all fell down, it won't directly fall on their heads. At least it will be a little safer. After that, Ryudo felt the floor under his feet tremble, and he fell into this dark space with Rue Hui. This narrow space is at most less than 2 meters in length and width, which is almost a very narrow distance. In such a narrow space, the two living people, Long Do and Rue Hui, more or less seemed a little crowded. Outside this underground space, there were all kinds of broken building wreckage, blocking the world above. But fortunately, there is still air circulation, otherwise we would have to suffocate here. After explaining the current situation to Mrs. Rue Hui, Ryudo smiled and said to her, in this pitch-black darkness, the young man's laughter made Rue Hui feel very comfortable, and the heavy burden in her heart was slightly relieved. Well, how to say it? Although Rue Hui is a heroine, she is still afraid after all. Especially when they are pressed in a large piece of debris. They don't know if the above will suddenly collapse in the next moment and directly crush them to death. However, although she knew that the hope was not great, Rue Hui still asked, Ryudo-kun, is there no way we can dig out? This I actually tried just now, but it is very dangerous. It's better not to do it. Suddenly, Ryudo raised his right hand with a wry smile. He was wearing a very strange glove on his hand. This rogue digging glove, which could easily dig holes in any place, was bought from his Krypton shopping mall. It was priced at 5 million yuan. Although the price wasn't cheap, it was really fast to dig a hole while wearing it. Coupled with the level 5 constitution of the dragon fighters, it was like digging a hole. But the problem is that now it's not that Ryudo can't dig, but that he doesn't dare to dig. According to his rough judgment, the location of the two now is about 20 meters underground of the Iwasaki mansion, which is the location of a refuge basement originally built by Iwasaki. After the mansion completely collapsed, Ryudo held Rue Hui from the corner of the hall and fell into the basement with the broken floor, and they were blocked in the basement. At present, the basement is in a mess, and he doesn't know how many building debris are there. Long Do had been casually digging with his rogue digging gloves, and he felt that the building above him was about to collapse. Long Do was so scared that he didn't dare to act recklessly anymore. His move is undoubtedly correct. After all, in this case, it is better to wait for rescue from above. Now that Ryudo and Rue Hui disappeared in this collapsed Iwasaki mansion, the people of the Kamiyoshi clan and the Tenma group will rescue them immediately. As long as they waited for the rescue team to move away all the wreckage of the buildings above, the two of them would be able to see the light of day again without having to risk their lives digging everywhere. Of course. In fact, Ryudo also has a way to solve this problem, which is to commit suicide and reopen it. But that's a move used when there is no other way. After all, no one wants to shoot themselves in the head. It's quite painful. In short, now we can only wait. After listening to Ryudo's explanation, Rue Hui couldn't help but sigh. But in this case, it's useless to be anxious. They can only wait for rescue from above. For a moment, Ryudo didn't speak. Rue Hui didn't know what to say, and the darkness suddenly became quiet. After a few minutes, Rue Hui seemed to be a little uncomfortable and forced to find a topic. By the way, Ryudo-kun, actually I have a question that I want to know. What's the question? Say it. What do you think of Ayam? For this question, Rue Hui has been wanting to ask for a long time. After all, Tenmu Ayam that woman. Well, how should she describe it? It's difficult to describe her as a normal person. Even if Ayam, who has been with Ryudo recently, seems to have become a little more normal, it's just from super psycho to psycho. Her nature will never change. When hearing this question, Ryudo smiled slightly and said, "This question is actually very simple, just one word. Obey." Obey. Does it mean to follow her lead blindly? It's more like tolerating a person with an abnormal brain. She is already like this. Why don't we obey her? Puff. Ha 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 ha. When Ryudo clearly described Ayam as a person with an abnormal brain, we couldn't help but laugh out loud. Generally speaking, the group of ministers and subordinates in the Tenma group who followed Ayam basically worshipped Ayam. In their hearts, Ayam was like a noble goddess that couldn't be disobeyed. However, although Ryudo was Ayam's man, he naturally didn't have any thoughts of worshipping that psycho. He just purely regarded Ayam as a naughty child with an abnormal brain. Of course, using a naughty child with an abnormal brain to describe Ayam was too evasive. After all, what she did wasn't at the level of a naughty child, but at the level of a psychopathic murderer. But no matter what, that psychopathic murderer was his woman, so he could only try to describe her as cute and harmless as possible. However, after hearing Ryudo's description, Hui laughed for a long time until her stomach hurt a little before she calmed down. She held her stomach and said, "No, I didn't expect Ryudo-kun to see Ayam like this. I thought you loved her so much that you couldn't extricate yourself. It's not like that. I haven't known Ayam for very long. I was even dragged back by her. Oh, so that's how it is. She suddenly took a fancy to you, and then you were packed back to the unrestrained Sky Tower. What a lucky and unfortunate man." Although she didn't see the scene with her own eyes, Hui could guess the situation at that time. How to put it, the fact that he was taken back by Ayam was somewhat embarrassing, so much so that Ryudo couldn't help but blush a little. But at the next moment, Hui sighed and said, "Sometimes, I really envy Ayam. She can freely express her love and bring people home whenever she wants." Envy? Envy such a thing? Ryudo originally thought that Hui would laugh at Ayam for being too thirsty, but he didn't expect her to say such a thing. In Ryudo's eyes, Madame Hui was a woman who had no interest in relationships, and she also had a daughter, the colored glaze. Logically speaking, she shouldn't be envious of such a thing. As if she saw through Ryudo's thoughts, Hui smiled faintly and said, "Why, do you think I'm not that kind of woman? Do you think that I'm a dignified, elegant, and magnanimous god who doesn't have any human emotions? No, that's not the case. Sister Hui, you're very humane. It's just that you don't usually show it." At this point, Ryudo raised his head slightly and recalled that when he had a fever not long ago, Hui had been taking care of him by his bedside. At first, Ryudo thought that Hui was an impersonal woman, but as the two of them spent more time together, he realized that Hui was essentially no different from the colored glaze. From a certain perspective, the colored glaze was a younger version of Hui who hadn't experienced so many hardships. On the other hand, Hui was actually a mature version of the colored glaze who had experienced many hardships. Especially in this extremely dim underground world, Hui's exceptionally young face was more similar to the colored glaze, making it easy for people to forget that she was actually a woman in her 50s. However, the 50-year-old Hui Kamashiro's love experience in her life was zero. That's right, zero. A perfect zero. Although she already had a daughter, the colored glaze, to put it bluntly, her daughter wasn't born from a man. That was why Hui didn't know what love felt like, nor did she know what love between a man and a woman was. When I was in school, because I was the eldest daughter of the Kamiyoshi family, not a single male student dared to approach me. After that, I was imprisoned in the Tenzai Shrine for 20 years. After I was released, it was a series of jobs. Before I knew it, I was already in my 50s. That's probably how I'll be for the rest of my life. In the pitch-black underground world, Hui spoke in a sentimental tone as she couldn't help but hug her knees. A person's life was less than 100 years. Now, she had unknowingly wasted more than half of her life. What she wasted was the most important, the most dazzling, and the most beautiful years of her life. thinking about it carefully. Such a life was truly a failure. Previously, Rue Hui knew that she wouldn't live past 60, so she didn't have the time to think about such trivial things. Now that she had used Iam's Hooligan's 100 Immortal Pill to get rid of the dead not of 60 years old, Rue Hui couldn't help but think about the meaning of life. Especially when she found out that her nemesis, Iam, had started to fall in love and could spend every night happily. Rue Hui, who had been alone in an empty room every night, suddenly felt that the nights were especially unbearable. Perhaps it was the darkness underground that made Rue Hui feel as though she had returned to those unbearable nights. Her mood instantly became gloomy. But just as Rue Hui leaned against the cold and rough wall and was about to move her head to make herself more comfortable, a solid and reliable body moved over. Following a light rubbing sound, Ryudo moved Rue Hui's head to his shoulder, while he reached out his hand and hugged the shoulders of this kamikaze leader from behind. HM? When Ryudo hugged her, Rue Hui couldn't help but let out a soft moan, but she still couldn't escape from the warm embrace. There's no such thing. The next moment, Ryudo took a deep breath and said solemnly, Sister Rue Hui, as long as you're alive, every day is a new beginning. You still have a long way to go in the future. You'll definitely meet the people you love and the people who love you. It had to be said that Ryudo really didn't know how to preach. It was a very ordinary sentence of encouragement, but when it came out of his mouth, it sounded a little stiff. It made people want to laugh when they heard it. But for some reason, these stiff words sounded especially pleasant in this pitch-black underground world, and even seeped into Rue Hui's heart very naturally. Since she was born, this was the first time Rue Hui was hugged in someone's arms. After all, she was the one hugging most of the time, although she had only hugged Iam and colored glaze. So this was the feeling of being hugged by someone. It was quite reassuring. Unknowingly, Rue Hui also reached out and hugged Ryudo's neck and laughed softly in his ear. You're just a kid in your teens, but you know how to make people happy with your glib tongue. It's not glib tongue in my eyes. Sister Rue Hui is indeed a very charming woman. Oh? Is that so? How is it compared to your Iam? Actually, when she asked this question, Rue Hui was a little shocked. She had never thought in her life that she would actually ask a man whether she was superior or inferior to Yongji in terms of being a woman. Ryudo heard this and replied without hesitation. Spring flower and autumn moon. Each has their own characteristics. I can't compare the two of you. And there's no way to compare. There's no way to compare. This sentence is not correct from a certain perspective. There's still a way to compare. In the darkness, Rue Hui reached out and turned Ryudo's face in her direction. A pair of pupils with a strange expression stared at the young man's eyes, as if those eyes could also speak. This. Sister Rue Hui. Could it be? In the next moment, before Ryudo could react, a soft and fragrant touch came from his mouth. After that, Ryudo could not think of anything else, and could only enter the primitive state of instinct. In the pitch-black underground world, in a small space that could barely fit two people, accompanied by the rustling sound of clothes falling, beautiful flowers bloomed on the pitch-black canvas, dyeing the darkness with an alluring blush. Chapter 394. Just as new emotions were blooming in the dark underground world. In the ruins of the Iwasaki mansion above, a well-equipped rescue team was desperately trying to save people. Because they didn't dare to use machines to dig, fearing that it would cause the ground to collapse and crush the people who might still be alive, all the rescue workers could only use the simplest tools to carefully clean up the scene. Lift that piece. Be careful, don't step on the ground. The steel cable is in place. Prepare to lift the largest piece of rock. Now, almost an hour had passed since the sudden explosion. The police officers of the Search Division 1 had already set up a cordon around the Iwasaki mansion, and there were police officers walking around everywhere. Logically speaking, this kind of incident shouldn't be under the jurisdiction of the search department, but because Tajima Orihana was a mole in the Heavenly Eye group, she immediately intervened. Of course, her intervention wasn't unrelated, because, reporting to the chief, Traces of explosion were found around the load-bearing pillars of the building. The culprit should have used the latest thermal expansion point explosion technology to instantly destroy all the load-bearing pillars. At this time, Tajima Orihana was sitting in a temporary command center not far away, and the explosives expert in front of her was explaining the principle of the explosion. After listening, Orihana frowned and said, "This kind of explosion technology is very complicated, right? It's very complicated, and it's not something an ordinary soldier can grasp. It requires the support of a powerful technical system, and even our official explosives team doesn't have it. Then you're an expert in this field. Which forces in the country can grasp this technology?" After hearing this question, the explosives expert frowned slightly. But he still said carefully, "As far as I know, the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group, a major arms dealer, can fully grasp this technology. What else? And a certain unspeakable force can also do it." Speaking of this, the explosives expert looked in the direction of the Tokyo port, not far away. As everyone knew, there were several American military garrisons near the port, such as the Nayama Army Center, Yokosuka Base, and so on. In other words, the unspeakable force that the explosives expert was referring to was naturally the American troops stationed in Japan. They were also one of the suspects. Although on the surface, the U.S. and Japan were allies father and son, officials like them naturally knew that the U.S. Army had been secretly stirring up trouble in Japan. Sure enough, was it that woman, Kohei Tanya, who made her move? Her movements were fast and ruthless, aiming to kill Rue Hui and Ryudo in a single blow. After the demolition expert left, Lin Hua could not help but sigh slightly. Lin Hua was naturally very clear about the Aramerican chess piece, Kohei, who was hiding in the royal family. Ever since she went to study in the Aramerican Empire, she had been secretly carrying out espionage activities. After she came back and became the Empress, she became the biggest hidden chess piece. In fact, Lin Hua had already thought that recently, when Rue Hui crazily nibbled away the power of Yatsuki and tried to become the most powerful woman in the country, she would inevitably be obstructed by the Empress. But no one expected that person to act so quickly and decisively. Rue Hui had just killed 2 golden herons and ascended to the peak of power, and almost immediately after she ascended to the throne, she was assassinated by explosives. This was too scary. And according to Lin Hua's investigation, Kohei Tanya should have bribed the Iwasaki family early on, which was why she could react so quickly, including the planting of the explosives. He had to teach that person a lesson. But Rue Hui and Ryudo Kiryu should be done for. Looking at the ruins of the collapsed building, Lin Hua could not help but shake his head. Although when she learned about this, Sama did not even think about it and said that Ryudo was still alive, and she looked very confident. But Lin Hua did not know where her confidence came from. But in any case, there was nothing else to do now, so Lin Hua could only continue to supervise the rescue work, hoping to find the 2 of them as soon as possible, even if it was 2 corpses. At the same time, while Lin Hua was rescuing people and catching the culprit dozens of meters underground, Ryudo and Rue Hui were also reminiscing about the aftertaste of what had just happened. Perhaps darkness could stimulate people's primitive desires, which was why they were unable to extricate themselves, and broke through to a new level of relationship. I never thought that this kind of thing could be so wonderful. When Rue Hui lay on Ryudo's shoulder, she felt warm all over, and even her heart was incomparably warm. Even in this thick darkness, she felt as safe as if she was at home. This sense of safety was given to her by this young man called Ryudo Kiryu. To be able to get such a feeling from a young man who was 40 years younger than her, this was something that Rue Hui had never dreamed of before. Me too, it's like a fairy tale. After hearing Rue Hui's words, Ryudo turned his head and kissed her lightly on the forehead. Then, he hugged her body that was slightly stained with sweat and dust tightly. Up until now, Ryudo had already done it with 2 women, who were also the 2 most beautiful women in the world, and the feelings he obtained were completely different. When he was with Yongji, it was like the 2 of them were engaged in a life-and-death duel. It was filled with wild excitement, and it was almost a situation where one would lose their life if they were not careful. When he was with Rue Hui, it was like the two of them were drinking tea in a tea room lit with sandalwood incense. However, it was not tea that he was tasting, but the strong feelings and sweetness of both of them, and it felt very comfortable. The most important thing was that Ryudo could empathize with Rue Hui, as if their souls were constantly communicating. Ayam could not give Ryudo the feeling of body and soul blending. After all, no one could empathize with a crazy person. At least Ryudo was not that crazy. After the two of them hugged each other for a while, Rue, we said slowly, "Get up, put on your clothes first. Otherwise, when the rescue team comes later, it will be quite awkward." In fact, when the two of them were blending in the darkness, they had already vaguely heard some movement from above. If there were no accidents, it should be the rescue team that was quickly cleaning up the wreckage above, and the movement was also approaching as time went by. In other words, Ryudo and Rue Hui should be able to be rescued soon, and they should be able to return to their daily lives. However, returning to their daily lives, was it really a good thing? Yes and no, at least for Rue Hui it was. Hearing the sound of cleaning up the wreckage getting closer and closer, Rue Hui only felt that her heart was getting more and more muddy. When some light gradually seeped out from above, she whispered, "Ryudo, Kuin, after you go out, can you forget everything that just happened?" "What do you mean? Do you think I'm that kind of irresponsible man?" After hearing Rue Hui's words, Ryudo frowned slightly. Speaking of which, Ryudo was still a very traditional, very male chauvinist type. In his eyes, as long as he had sex with her, she was his woman. Unless the other party was really unwilling to be with him, he would definitely not let go. It's not a problem of being irresponsible or not. After all, you are Ayam's man, and I'm just an old woman. I don't want to see you in a dilemma. In fact, when lying on Ryudo's body, Rue Hui was already thinking about the ending of this matter. Although Rue Hui and Ayam were allies now, secretly sleeping with someone else's man was a bit too much. What's more, the age gap between herself and Ryudo was too big. Even Rue Hui's daughter was the same age as Ryudo. This was completely like an old cow eating young grass. It would make people gossip. "So you're talking about this? No problem, don't think too much." Seeing that Rue Hui didn't seem to be able to think for a while, Ryudo hugged her slender waist from behind and smiled. "Do you think Ayam is a woman who cares about this kind of thing? She won't care about sharing a man with you." Ayam was originally a crazy beauty, not to mention that she had already said to Ryudo, "If you can pull her to bed, I'll be more than happy." So from a certain point of view, the matter between Ryudo and Rue Hui was originally fueled by Ayam, so there was no need to worry about Ayam. But the secular world? Secular world? Who is the secular world? Now we are the secular world, the people who don't like, go die. When he said the last few words, Ryudo's tone had a hint of murderous intent, and at the same time, it also had the unique indifference of a superior. Don't know if it was because he had been with women like Ayam and Rue Hui for a long time, or because he had experienced too many big events. The current Ryudo had matured at an extremely fast speed. What's more, he originally knew that he was taking the evil path and was destined to be a demon king. So if anyone in the secular world pointed at his relationship with Rue Hui, Ryudo would not hesitate to send him to hell. "Ryudo-kun, you're right, I'm too weak." After feeling the domineering aura of the teenager behind her, Rue Hui couldn't help but reach out and touch Ryudo's face, and kissed him again in the gradually emerging sunlight. Of course, Ryudo was right. After all, when their Kamiyoshi clan and Tenma group merged, they already represented the word secular world. Whoever dared to point at their relationship, just send him to hell. There was no need to consider this at all. And the only thing Rue Hui had to consider was her daughter Colored Glaze's feelings. After all, Ryudo was Colored Glaze's classmate, and her mother was with her classmate. For Colored Glaze, this was really awkward. But how to convince Colored Glaze? That was Rue Hui's problem. Rue Hui also believed that she could successfully convince her daughter to allow her to be with Ryudo and pursue her long-lost happiness. Boom. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Just as Ryudo and Rue Hui were kissing passionately in the collapsed underground world, the ruins above were finally moved away, and a woman's head poked out from outside. It was Yohana Tokushima. This Search Section 1 chief rushed over as soon as she found out that the tunnel was going to be dug out, wanting to see if the two people below were still alive. But although Rue Hui was shy and quickly separated from Ryudo, Yohana immediately sniffed when she poked her head in, and then showed a somewhat strange expression. After all, this was a sealed underground space, and Ryudo and Rue Hui had just made love inside, so naturally, there would be some cough, some more special smell. Yohana was also an old hand in this, so naturally, it was impossible for her not to recognize this smell. So she glanced at Rue Hui, whose clothes were a little messy, and whose face was a little flushed, and then looked at Ryudo, who was pursing his lips and smiled. "Are you two having fun down there? How about I pretend that I didn't dig out and let you stay a little longer?" Ryudo heard this and replied with anger and amusement, "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and pull her up." Yes. The world's #1 boy toy. Whatever you say is right. Hey, who are you calling the world's #1 boy toy? In the midst of the noise, Rue Hui and Ryudo were rescued from below by the rescue team, and they were quickly sent back to the unrestrained Sky Tower by helicopter. When the two landed on the tarmac of the unrestrained Sky Tower, Ryudo, who got off the helicopter, deliberately reached out and held Rue Hui's hand, and even used a very intimate gesture of 10 fingers interlocking. "Wait, don't. It's okay. There's nothing shameful about our relationship. Just be generous." On the way to IM study, Ryudo smiled at Rue Hui and said without hesitation, how to put it, it was inevitable for an ugly daughter-in-law to meet her mother-in-law. Although Rue Hui's age was more like a mother-in-law than IM's, she was obviously more nervous than ordinary daughters-in-law. However, after seeing the two walk in hand, IM, who was sitting on the office chair, was first stunned. Then she laughed. Ha ha. What's so funny? Don't tell me you haven't seen people holding hands before. Originally, Rue Hui was still a little nervous, but after being laughed by Yongji, she immediately returned to her usual attitude of having a battle of wits and courage. She asked in a calm tone, No, I'm just happy." At this time, Yongji smiled as she came to Rue Hui's side. She leaned over and whispered something into her round and smooth ear. "Next time, if there's a chance, let's play together with Ryudo-kun, sister Rue Hui. Hee, I'm looking forward to it." The moment she heard this sentence, Rue Hui's calm face that had just barely recovered collapsed, and she immediately blushed. Just like this, there was another burst of laughter in the office, and Ryudo looked at the two women with a puzzled expression, as if he had not realized what kind of path of no return he was about to embark on. Chapter 395. The following week could be said to be the happiest time of Ryudo's life. During the day, he accompanied Rue Hui to work at Kansai Imperial Garden. They flirted while working and were immersed in the joy of being in love. It was the first time Rue Hui was in a serious relationship with someone. Ryudo could be considered as such. After all, his relationship with IM was more like an empress and a boy toy. It was not really a relationship. Hence, they often ate together, strolled by the lake, admired the flowers under the tree, and watched the stars at night. They often did something indescribable. As the saying went, a woman at 30 was like a wolf, at 40 was like a tiger, and at 50 she could sit on the ground and suck the soil. Rue Hui was now in a more vigorous stage. However, no matter how vigorous she was, compared to IM, who was a psychopath, Rue Hui was still much more reserved. Although she liked to be with Ryudo, she was also very flexible. She was very gentle, which made Ryudo feel very warm. During this week, Rue Hui had also cooperated with IM to cooperate from the inside and outside. She had almost all of the Yatsuki's forces in her pocket. Among the original Yatsuki's members, except for Tsukudori Kyoji, who chose to run away with his family when he saw that the situation was not good, most of the members were either bribed, roped in, assassinated, or replaced. After a short week, the entire upper echelon of Tokyo's forces had been purged. Rueihue now had absolute control over the situation. When things on her side were stabilized, Rueihue began to plan her revenge. That's right, revenge. Although the Iwasaki Mansion explosion incident a week ago helped Rueihue in some way, she naturally would not forget to find out the culprit behind it. According to the joint investigation of the Kamiyoshi clan and the Tenma group, the culprit was the current Japanese Imperial Empress, Empress Kawada. That woman had been secretly operating with the support of American, trying to control the power in her own hands. At this time, Kawada probably saw that Rueihue had been crazily nibbling away the Yatsuki's forces recently. She was afraid that she would become the most powerful woman in the country, so she took the lead. He had to admit that Kawada was really, she is quite far-sighted. Even if she didn't do anything to me at that time, I would have taken her life sooner or later. On this sunny afternoon, Rueihue was lazily lying on the grass, leaning her head on Ryudo's leg. At the same time, she raised her head to look at her little lover. From this angle, the warm sunlight shone on Rueihue's delicate and flawless face, as if adding a layer of radiance to her face, making this God Generation's leader look even more beautiful. Ryudo also smiled and lowered his head, kissing Rueihue's cherry lips. Then he smiled and said, "But the Empress didn't kill us. She actually helped us become a matchmaker." And American's diplomatic group was definitely the one that appeared the most in recent years. After all, they were related to each other by blood. For the current relationship between Japan and American, the vast majority of Japanese people were well aware, but no one dared to raise an objection. Even for the visit of the most powerful country in the world, most of the media were very proud of it, quite a bit of the pride of father's favorite child. Therefore, just before the clock pointed to 11 in the morning, a large number of reporters from various TV stations and online programs had gathered near the Kikyo outside the Kokyo. Under the barrage of the reporters, the American emissary group that was heading to the Kokyo, in 3 black sedans, slowly arrived at the entrance of the Kikyo gate. This group of Americans also followed the tradition and got off in front of the Kikyo and walked to the inside of the Kokyo. When the group of well-dressed gentlemen passed by, the lights on both sides of the road kept flashing, and they also cooperated and waved, showing a very friendly gesture. Of course, in the mind of this group of diplomatic group, it was, "Take a picture, you're blinding my eyes, bastard." But at least on the surface, this group of Americans still maintained a harmonious appearance and followed the rules to walk to the Kokyo. However, such a happy atmosphere was covered with a layer of shadow with the appearance of the 3 huge helicopters. Rumble, rumble. Before the group of American diplomatic group walked into the Kokyo, a gust of wind swept up in the sky above the Kokyo. This gust of wind is helicopters? When everyone looked up with an expression of disbelief, they saw 3 white helicopters flying out of the clouds not far away. And it was a huge armed helicopter. It was a genuine armed helicopter. Those who were slightly knowledgeable would know that it was the Augusta Westland AW-101 model, and it was loaded with various weapons that could be seen with the naked eye. The most terrifying thing was that the 3 armed helicopters had a huge eye pattern on the side, and behind the eye pattern was a map of the Earth. This feeling seemed to indicate that this heavenly eye was monitoring every movement of the world. At the same time, it was also the symbol of the Heavenly Eye Group. Speaking of which, among the group of reporters here, although not many people knew about the Heavenly Eye Group, it was not to the extent that no one knew. But they never dreamed that the armed helicopters of the Heavenly Eye Group would openly fly into the Kokyo from the main entrance, over the heads of the American diplomatic group and reporters. It should be known that the Kokyo had an important position in this country, not to mention rushing in with an armed helicopter. Even driving in with a car was not allowed. Even foreign VIPs could only enter on foot. However, this tradition, which had been going on for so many years, had become a joke under the invasion of the armed helicopters, a huge joke. What was even more exaggerated was that the armed helicopter actually flew directly to the top of the Kokyo main hall, in front of everyone's eyes, and floated there proudly. For the entire royal family, this situation had no other meaning other than a demonstration. When the group of people led by Emperor Wuda and the Empress came out of the main hall, they were all shocked by the scene in front of them. What is this thing? Who dares to be so presumptuous here? After seeing the 3 armed helicopters, the short middle-aged man couldn't help but stomp his feet in anger. And he quickly ordered the guards of the Kokyo on the side. Quick, go shoot them down. However, when the guards heard the emperor's words, they wiped their sweat and said helplessly, "Emperor, we don't have any weapons to shoot down the armed helicopters." In the end, Nippon was not allowed to have an army, and the firepower of the Kokyo guards was very limited. It was simply a dream to rely on a few people and a few guns to shoot down the highly armed helicopters. Damn it, aha. Seeing that the emperor seemed to be so angry that his blood vessels were about to burst, the empress standing behind him also frowned slightly. "Sister, what the hell is going on?" At this time, a blonde fake foreigner next to her, Xiao Heqianing, the younger brother of Xiao Heqinya, also came to her side. As the president of the Great Beauty Association, Father John naturally wouldn't miss this kind of reception. He must come to say hello and get to know people. Xiao Heqinya frowned and said, "It's the Heavenly Eye Group. It's their armed helicopters. What does Heavenly Eye want to do? What does this have to do with them?" Although Xiao Heqinya knew that recently the Kamiyoshi clan was preparing to take revenge for her assassination of Rui Hui, she didn't expect the Heavenly Eye Group to be involved in this matter. However, what Xiao Heqianya didn't expect was that as the 3 armed helicopters slowly landed in front of the main hall, 2 beautiful and familiar figures walked down from them. A super beauty in a red silk dress walked out of the first helicopter. She had the terrifying charm of a witch. As soon as she got off the helicopter, the Kokyo guards who surrounded her with guns raised were so shocked that they were speechless. From the second helicopter, a super beauty wearing a dark black kimono walked out. Her beauty was not inferior to the former at all. She had a faint smile on her face, and that graceful, elegant, and cultured bearing also made people secretly shocked. From the third helicopter, a young handsome man who looked at most 16 or 17 years old walked out. Xiao Heqianya was too lazy to look at him. But the real key now was that the Kamiyoshi clan, main god Dai Rui Hui, and the Heavenly Eye clan patriarch Heavenly Eye Am. These 2 actually came together. This actually showed their attitude. These 2. So they have this kind of secret relationship. Seeing this scene, Xiao Heqianya felt her breathing quicken. It should be known that the Kamiyoshi clan and the Heavenly Eye clan had been fighting openly and secretly for many years. Basically, everyone in the circle was fully aware of this. Who would have thought that in this generation of Kanzaki and Heavenly Eye, these 2 clan leaders would suddenly abandon their former enmity and join hands in front of everyone? Moreover, they seemed to be coming directly at the imperial family led by Xiao Heqianya. At the same time, the group of American ambassadors, not far away, also hurriedly arrived at the battlefield. It was as if they were the last piece of the puzzle that formed this pot of drama. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Ayam and Dai Rui Hui looked at each other and smiled. Then they walked toward the Mikado couple in front of them. Wait. Stop. Seeing these 2 peerless beauties walking toward them without saying a word, the Kokyo guard captain hurriedly stood in front of them. However, a shadow flashed by, and Ryudo's body flew more than 10 meters like lightning. He kicked the guard captain and sent him flying. Chapter 396. At this moment, Long Do already had a superhuman physique. Coupled with sufficient financial support, this young man could buy hundreds of active and passive skills. He was so strong that he was like a cheat. When facing normal enemies, he was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Whoever he touched would die. The crowd only saw a figure flash, and the guard captain was sent flying by a kick. He flew for more than 10 meters before crashing into a big tree. Crack. The moment he hit the tree, The people close to him clearly heard a crisp sound from his skull. Then he fell to the ground and didn't move anymore. Without a doubt, the Kokyo guard captain was dead, and he was killed in front of everyone. However, compared to the fact that this person was already dead, what shocked many people was the indifferent expressions on Rue Hui and Yongji's faces at this moment. Although they didn't know who Ryudo Kiryu was, they definitely knew that he was with Ayum and Rue Hui. A person who came with the Kamiyoshi and Heavenly Eye group actually killed someone in front of so many royals in the Kokyo, and even in front of the American diplomatic group. These guys aren't crazy, are they? Even little Hetiening, who was standing beside little Hetienya, couldn't help but widen his eyes when he saw this frightening scene. The group of American ambassadors not far away had expressions of disbelief on their faces, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Indeed, from a diplomatic point of view, this situation was too ridiculous. I'm from the American diplomatic group. I'm on a diplomatic mission with the Neon royal family. But as soon as I arrived at the emperor's house, I found a few outsiders fighting here. Did I go to the wrong place? Immediately, the American diplomatic group looked at the emperor in surprise. They wanted to see how the emperor, who was nominally the leader of Neon, would react. After all, these people were doing whatever they wanted here, slapping the face of the royal family, and even killing a member of the royal family. Who could tolerate this? Of course, he couldn't tolerate it. No one could tolerate it. Therefore, the moment he reacted to what had happened, the current Heavenly Emperor Wuda's face flushed red. He shouted loudly, "How dare you? How dare he commit murder in the imperial residence?" People came from both sides. "Take him down." With this order, the Kokyo guards raised their weapons and charged toward Ryudo. However, Ryudo did not even bother to look at them. Instead, he casually raised his hand and gestured at the Kokyo guards in front of him to fire. When everyone saw this gesture, they were dumbfounded. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? Don't tell me he thinks his fingers can whoosh. Bang. In the next second after Long Do made the gesture, a violent sound of wind breaking rapidly came from afar and landed in the direction of his finger. A large caliber sniper bullet hit him on the spot. The head of the Kokyo guard running at the front exploded like a watermelon. For a moment, yellow and white pieces fell to the ground, as if there was a bloody storm. Plop. Accompanied by the sound of the headless body falling to the ground, the surroundings of the Kokyo main hall were terrifyingly quiet. That was a heavy sniper rifle? After hearing the whistle and seeing the scene of a headless body being shot, a few drops of cold sweat fell from Kawada's forehead. Shooting from such a long distance away and still being able to blow up a person's head instead of penetrating it was not something an ordinary sniper rifle could do. I advise you not to move. Right now, there are 50 Barrett 82 heavy sniper rifles aiming in this direction. They can send 50 people on their way in 1 second, and they won't even have a complete corpse. Ryudo, who gave the order to kill, did not even look at the headless body. Instead, he showed a devilish smile to the Heavenly Emperor couple and the American envoys not far away. Indeed, what Ryudo said was the truth. There was no falsehood. Now, in the periphery of the Kokyo, a large number of snipers had already been placed by his Heavenly Eye Group Weapons Department. They were equipped with Barrett anti-material sniper rifles that could shoot 12 7mm bullets. How terrifying was the power of this heavy sniper rifle. They had seen it just now. When it hit the head was completely shattered. When it hit the middle of the body was cut in half. Such powerful force was not a weapon used against people. It was used to remotely destroy some enemy equipment, such as parked planes, radar devices, trucks, and various other important assets. After all, the effect of this thing was too exaggerated. It was enough to make people pee on the spot. Just like now. Ugh, 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 ugh. After seeing the blood, flesh, and bone fragments splattering from the shattered head, Wu Diok's face turned pale. Then he could not help but cover his mouth and retch. The scene was really ugly. But before he finished retching, Ryudo's figure slowly walked toward the Heavenly Emperor couple. "Stop. Don't come over. All the Kokyo guards around swore that they definitely wanted to warn the young invader. However, even though they had such thoughts in their minds, this group of guards did not even dare to let out a fart. They could only watch helplessly as Long Do approached them. Of course, this was also a matter of course. After all, there were dozens of anti-material sniper rifles pointing at this side. No one wanted to be the next unlucky person to have their head blown open. So when Ryudo came to the front of the formation formed by the Kokyo guards, he just glanced at the guards indifferently, then sneered, "I will count to 3. Get out of the way. Otherwise, let your family pick up your skulls on the grass." At this time, behind the Kokyo guards was where the Emperor and the Empress were. They were the last line of defense to protect the symbol of Japan. However, the moment Ryudo said this group of guards, who were supposed to be loyal, gulped and didn't seem to intend to give up resistance. After all, the one behind them was the Emperor, the symbol of Japan. Suddenly, the Kokyo guard standing at the front and closest to Ryudo couldn't help but say angrily, "Bastard! You are also a Japanese. How dare you do this to the Emperor? Kacha." Before he finished speaking, Ryudo grabbed his head and twisted it with both hands. Under Ryudo's monstrous strength, the head of the Kokyo guard was directly torn off, literally twisted off. "I don't like the word Japanese, so I plan to destroy this country, so that Japan is gone, and I am not a Japanese anymore, right?" After lifting the head that was still bleeding with fear in his eyes, Ryudo smiled slightly and threw it to the back of the crowd in front of him. With this throw, the blood-stained head landed squarely on Heavenly Emperor Wuda's body. The short, middle-aged man, who had been scared out of his wits subconsciously, held the head in his hand and looked at the pair of protruding dead fish eyes. "Hey, Just when Emperor Wu Deku was so scared by the head that he almost threw it away, Ryudo said indifferently, "Don't throw it. Hold it tightly, or I will let you swallow him alive." Ryudo's voice sounded very indifferent, but everyone present did not hesitate to think that he would do as he said. Demon, this young man is a demon. Unknowingly, the Kokyo guards who were blocking in front of Ryudo also retreated to the side, making way for the young demon to kill. And Ryudo walked forward without hesitation, approaching the Emperor and his wife, who were standing at the entrance of the main hall step by step. "This guy. What does this guy want to do? Are the Kamiyoshi clan and the Tenma group crazy? How could he act so recklessly in public?" The current situation was completely beyond Kawada's expectations. Although she thought that Ruehue and the Kamiyoshi clan would retaliate against her, she didn't expect that they would actually kill their way into the Kokyo and in front of the American diplomatic group. Killing people in front of the diplomatic group was a very rare diplomatic incident in the entire history of human beings. The degree of horror was comparable to when the American president suddenly pooped in his pants when he received foreign guests. It was simply ridiculous. What about the Kokyo guards nearby? What about the self-defense forces? Why hasn't anyone come yet? Seeing Ryudo was about to come in front of her, Kawada's hand holding her sleeve tightened. Originally, there were groups of guards around the Kokyo. After all, this was the last bit of face the Nipponese had after being beaten to a pulp. They still had to protect it. But Ryudo's side was about to tear down the Kokyo, but there was still no support here. Could it be? No need to wait. Now the area around the main hall has been completely blocked by our people. You won't receive any reinforcements. Ruehue seemed to have noticed Kawada's nervousness and uneasiness, and she smiled at her in an elegant tone. What? Are you crazy? How dare you do this to the royal family?" Slap. Before Kawada finished speaking, Ryudo directly slapped her in the face. "Shut up." Looking at the queen sitting on the ground with an expression of disbelief, Ryudo sneered, "You have no right to speak now." After slapping the empress in front of everyone, Long Do casually took out a document and placed it in front of the current emperor, Wuda. "In 3 minutes, there will be a live broadcast for the entire country, and I want you to read the contents of this document in front of everyone." Read the contents of the document? Perhaps because he was holding a head in his hand, Emperor Wu was almost scared out of his mind. He looked at the document in Ryudo's hand with trepidation. The beginning of the document was the declaration of the last royal family. The document said that from today onward, the Neon royal family no longer existed, and the Yamato dynasty that had been passed down for 126 generations came to an end. At the same time, the local religion led by Shinto was abolished, and all shrines in the country were closed and destroyed. If this document was read, the result would be the foundation of the entire country would be completely uprooted. After reading the document, Emperor Wuda was dumbfounded. He asked in a trembling voice, What are you? Is there something wrong with you? Do you think this declaration can be recognized by the country? Suddenly, Kawada also stood up and yelled at Ryudo, You can threaten us. But don't think that threatening the emperor to make such a declaration can change anything. This country can't be controlled by you. The parliament, the cabinet, the court, and several major parties, including the governors of the various prefectures and districts, are all our people. Just as Kawada was about to say that they can't be controlled by you, Rue walked over and said with a smile, what? With Kawada's identity, she naturally knew how important the positions that Rue mentioned were. They controlled almost all the important officials in Neon. At this time, Rue leaned over and said with a smile, These officials have all submitted to us, plus the forces in the Yatsuki. Now this country is a toy in my hands. I can play with it however I want. Even you are one of my toys. Hiss. The moment she heard this, Kawada couldn't help but take a deep breath. But she still tried to insist, Are you stupid enough to think that Neon is an independent country? As long as America is still supporting me, you can't do anything to me. Yeah, this is why we chose to make a move when the diplomatic group came. With that said, Rue turned to look at Ayam not far away. Yongji, on the other hand, got the hint and clapped her hands. A dozen black-winged ninjas in black immediately appeared behind the American envoys and stabbed a few long needles into their brains. Then there's no problem. After this diplomatic group is brainwashed, they will become our puppets. They will do whatever we tell them to do. After seeing Kawada's stunned expression, Rue explained with a smile. Crazy. These people's brains are not normal. Seeing that the situation was heading in the direction of a bottomless abyss, the queen finally couldn't help but warn. You are making an enemy of the most powerful country in the world. Do you know the consequences? You're wrong. Suddenly, Ryudo came in front of the queen, raised her chin, and said with a smile, It's you who are making an enemy of the most powerful force in the world. The consequences are that you and your master will all die. No one will be left alive. My master and I. No way? This crack. Just when Kawada just realized what Ryudo was saying, her vision suddenly tilted, and her neck was twisted to a strange angle with a crisp sound. Chapter 397. In front of so many people, Ryudo snapped the neck of the Empress and Tianya. This scene was also quite shocking. Seeing his wife die in front of him, Emperor Wuda was stunned at first, then rushed over with red eyes. I'll kill you. Save it, don't waste time. Ryudo casually kicked him to the ground, stepped on Emperor Wuda's head and smiled. There's still 2 minutes. Are you going to read it later? No, I won't read it even if I die. After being stepped on and pressed on the ground, Emperor Wu felt like he had nothing left to lose. Anyway, his wife was already dead. After reading that declaration, there was a high chance that he would be killed. Then what was the point of reading it? Is that so? Suddenly, Ryudo made a gesture. Not far away, a burst of gunfire exploded, directly turning the group of guards around Emperor Wuda and Owadaichi, who was rushing over, into pieces of meat. Kill as you please. Kill us all if you have the ability. Oh, I don't know if the we you mentioned includes these people? Seeing that Emperor Wuda was still stubborn, Ryudo smiled and took out a tablet and placed it in front of him. This is When he saw the image on the tablet, Wu Detian Emperor was stunned. Because on the other side of the screen his parents, the previous Emperor Mingtai, were chained to a pillar. Next to them was Emperor Wuda and the Empress's daughter, Princess Fukudaheim. Beside the two pillars, there were several vicious dogs that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They were glaring at the Emperor's family like tigers eyeing their prey. You're not human. Seeing that the other party actually caught his parents and daughter, Emperor Wu began to struggle. You're not human. I'll ask you again, are you going to read it? If you're not going to read it, prepare to release the dogs. Suddenly, Ryudo looked at the scene on the tablet and explained with a smile, those dogs are Iam's vicious dogs. They like to eat human flesh, especially from the feet. Vicious dogs? Eating human flesh? The moment he heard this, Heavenly Emperor Wu felt a chill run down his spine. He almost stopped breathing. Ryudo's current meaning was very simple. If you don't read the declaration of the last royal family, then wait for the scene of your parents and daughter being slowly bitten to death by vicious dogs. By the way, if you start from the feet, it will take more than 10 minutes before you die. These 10 minutes are probably as long as 10 years to the three of them. Are you sure you want to watch? In front of Emperor Wu Diak, Ryudo took out a button with the word unlock written on it and placed his thumb on it. The countdown begins now. 3, 2, I'll read. I'll read it. Before the dragon head could finish counting to 2, Heavenly Emperor Wu had already broken down and said these words. Just now, his wife had died in front of him. At best, it happened in an instant. If it happened, then it happened. But if Heavenly Emperor Wu had to watch his parents and young daughter being bitten to death by dogs, the situation would be completely different. Strange. Wouldn't it have been better if you did this earlier? After casually patting the face of the Heavenly Emperor, Ryudo stood up with a smile. At the same time, there were already many staff members running over with some filming equipment. They ignored the flesh and blood on the ground and the scattered corpses. Instead, they began to carry out the pre-broadcast work. Someone even pulled Heavenly Emperor Wuda up from the ground, wiped his face, and touched up his makeup to ensure that this guy didn't look like someone who was coerced on TV. All of this made Heavenly Emperor Wu feel even more terrified because he felt like the world was about to end. Actually, isn't it good to use the brainwashing technique of the Blackwing Ninja to control him? Why does he have to agree to read it himself? When Ryudo came to Rue Hui, she had a confused expression. Just like how the Blackwing Ninja used a secret technique to control the minds of the American envoys. If the same method was used to control the Heavenly Emperor and make him read the declaration of the last royal family, it would be much easier than now. I want him to read it while he's awake. It'll be more interesting this way. Long Do looked at the man who was pressed on the podium and seemed to have a mental breakdown. His smile was uglier than his crying face. Long Do said in a cheerful tone, "Ha ha. Well done. You're already good at torturing people." After hearing Ryudo's words, Iam couldn't help but touch his face with a smile. Is that so? But this is not enough. There are still many people waiting for me to torture, such as that group over there. At this point, Long Do looked at the American envoys who were standing in the same spot with muddle-headed gazes. Iam and Rue Hui naturally understood what he meant. Since I'm going to play, I'll play bigger. What's there to be proud of about controlling and destroying a country? Becoming the master of this world is more fun. Interesting. Ha 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 ha. After sensing Ryudo's strong murderous intent, Iam's smile widened. She, the current patriarch of the Tenma clan, was born with the greatest malice, but her vision seemed to be a bit narrow. She was only satisfied with the small matter of destroying Nippon. But from Ryudo's perspective, he was looking directly at the world, at a world-class power on the other side of the sea, American. What could be more interesting than destroying the most powerful country in the world and killing everyone inside? At that time, when Long Do, Yongji, and the others ruled the world, their children would be able to walk on the dilapidated streets filled with the stench of decay, carefully observe the world of the previous generation that was destroyed by their parents, and feel proud of it. Of course, this was very evil and inhumane. But now, what Ryudo wanted was evil. After all, he walked the path of evil. Of course, if he could not be human, he would not be human. There was nothing wrong with being a demon king that destroyed everything. Just as Ryudo, Ayam, and Ruehui were discussing how to attack American, the emperor's impromptu speech not far away also ended. In the speech that was destined to be remembered in the future, Emperor Otoku honestly read the last imperial declaration and announced the end of the country. After the speech, the middle-aged man who was about to lose his balance was dragged away by the guards. He was directly dragged into the main hall and burned to ashes. Today, the Kokyo, that had been passed down for hundreds of years, completely disappeared. The fire burned from the morning until the next day, burning for a full day and night. 5 minutes after the speech, the last Yamakino Jinru, the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Tanagawa, committed suicide with 18 gunshots in his own residence. This also caused the entire official power to fall into the hands of his subordinates. Ever since the Kokyo started burning, the country had been plunged into chaos. Everyone was confused about the future of Japan, and no one knew what had happened. However, almost everyone knew one thing for certain, and that was that this country was finished. However, just as Japan was falling apart under the destructive actions of Ayam and the others, Ayam, in the unrestrained sky tower, unexpectedly obtained something. It was a bright morning. Just as Ayam got up from Ryudo's body, she suddenly saw a small shiny ball at her bedside. This is... Ayam curiously picked it up, and the name of the small ball immediately appeared. Special item, Shattered Nation Jade. An item that can be obtained after destroying a country. It represents the end of a country. Oh, so that's how it is. Shattered Nation Jade. So this is what it is. Until then, Ayam remembered that there seemed to be such a place in her personal attributes that had not been filled. Now Ayam's attributes were already at LV5, but because of the 6th demon title, all of her attributes actually had the potential to be upgraded to LV6. But in order to upgrade her attributes to LV6, what was needed was not money, but a special item called Shattered Nation Jade, which was the one in Ayam's hand. Originally, I thought that I would have to completely wipe Japan off the map to get this. It turns out that it's just destroying the consciousness. Looking at the small ball in her hand, Ayam could not help but smile. From the current situation, almost all of Japan's citizens had the thought of this country is done for, and most of them were even secretly preparing to emigrate to other countries. In this case, Japan actually existed in name only, so the system determined that Ayam had succeeded in destroying the country and gave her the most special item, Shattered Nation Jade. With this item, Ayam could upgrade one of her attributes to the exceptional LV6, Heavenly Demon Monarch. But now the question was, which one should she upgrade first? Intelligence, physique, courage, insight, charm. Most of the attributes had their own uses, and each attribute's use was also different. If it was like Ryudo, who was a fighter, he should choose to upgrade his constitution first, but Ayam was obviously not. After thinking for a few seconds, Ayam looked at the special value charm. In her past life, charm could be said to be the attribute that helped Ayam the most. With the LV6 Extreme Superman charm, she almost had a strong affinity that made people want to sacrifice their lives for her. Most of the members of the Heavenly Eye group came from this. Then, LV6 charm was already so strong. What about LV6 charm? What kind of exaggerated situation would it be? In order to know how strong LV6, Heavenly Demon Monarch, was, Ayam clicked on the plus next to LV6, Charm. From LV6 Charm to LV6 Charm requires Shattered Nation Jade. Confirm payment. Confirm. Payment. Accompanied by Ayam's slender finger clicking yes on the screen, the small ball in her hand also instantly cracked, turned into countless stars, and flew into Ayam's body. At the same time, Ayam's charm also became LV6 Charm, Heavenly Demon Monarch. What's so special about this LV6 charm? I don't seem to feel it myself. Different from other attributes, the charm attribute has no effect on me. It depends on other people's reaction to be counted. So Ayam quickly shook Ryudo, who was lying on the side. The latter drunkenly sat up and asked, Ayam? It's so early. Halfway through, Ryudo's eyes suddenly straightened, because he found that Ayam, who was looking at him with a smile, seemed to be completely different. Early in the morning, Ayam's familiar face bathed in the sun, giving a feeling of a goddess descending to the earth. Even Ryudo wanted to lie down and lick her nightgown. This was not a matter of whether she was beautiful or not, but it was like as if... Anyway, Ryudo didn't know how to describe it. It was like she only needed to say one word, and everyone was willing to die for her. Seeing Ryudo looking at her face, Ayam was obviously very satisfied with his attitude. So she smiled and said, Okay, lie back and sleep. Yes, I'll go sleep. Dong. Before he finished speaking, Long Do fell back onto the bed with a plop and fell into a deep sleep. His body very naturally obeyed Yongji's orders, and he didn't even resist or think. This situation was a bit like the Black Feather Ninja, using a long needle to pierce the brain acupoints to turn someone into a living puppet, and then giving orders to the living puppet. So that's the case. This is the ability of level 6 charm, Heavenly Demon Monarch. I'll try it again. Thinking of this, Ayam stood up, put on her clothes and socks, tidied herself up, and then quickly took a helicopter to the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. There was something that Ayam always wanted to do, but that girl Rue we seemed to mind, so she didn't want to do it with her. So now that she had level 6 charm, she had to try it out quickly. If even Rue we couldn't resist this level 6 charm, then Ayam would know what kind of terrifying power she had. It was enough to destroy the world. So not long after, Ayam appeared in front of Rue Hui's door and knocked on the door of the Master Kamishiro's bedroom. Rue Hui, who opened the door, was still wearing her nightgown, looking sleepy, and her eyes were only slightly closed. Ayam, you came here so early in the morning. HM? Before Rue Hui could react, Ayam reached out and touched her soft and delicate face, looking at this woman with a pair of eyes that seemed to have magic. Dear Rue Hui, how about we go in and have a chat? As she spoke, Ayam stuck out her red tongue and licked her lips. Not only did this girl like men, but she also liked women. For Rue Hui, she was still a bit dangerous. So, logically speaking, Rue Hui shouldn't have let her in. But this time, for some reason, she actually agreed. Chapter 398. What's wrong with me today? I feel like I'm bewitched. Not long after, when Rue Hui got up from her bed, she looked at Ayam lying beside her and Ryudo, who ran over without her noticing. She had a helpless expression. Not long ago, Rue Hui was bewitched by Ayam's heavenly demon charm and let her in. Then she was played. It was not news that Ayam liked both men and women. Since Rue Hui fell for her trick, she could only accept her fate and play with her. But as they played, Ryudo quickly ran over. What was supposed to be a tea party between two ladies suddenly turned into a game of two ladies and one man. Rue Hui did not expect this at all. Something's not right with her today. Her charm is several times stronger than usual. Something must have happened. Instantly, Ryudo frowned slightly and then looked at Ayam. Although he knew that Ayam's charm was at the level of level 5 Extreme Superman, her magic power today was too terrifying. It was several times stronger than before. Just think of it as me being bewitched. Ayam lay on the bed with a strange smile. Bewitched. Even bewitched would run away when they see you. After letting out a sigh, Rue Hui tidied her hair and said seriously, let's talk about something serious. America can't hold on any longer. Dozens of garrison bases have entered a state of battle readiness. They might attack at any moment. Ever since the royal family had been executed, Japan had been thrown into chaos. As an old father, American naturally couldn't sit still. Within a day, there was a stern protest from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If it weren't for the brainwashed envoys stalling for time, The garrison base would have sent soldiers over by now. Up until now, America's military had 88 military bases and facilities in Nippon, with more than 30,000 soldiers stationed there. The headquarters of the military bases was in Yokota Base in Tokyo. It was not far from Ryudo and the others. 30,000 troops? That's no small matter. We have to think of a way to deal with it. Suddenly, Ryudo thought for a moment, and then his face showed some difficulty. As the boss of the weapon department, Ryudo naturally knew how many soldiers there were in his organization. Now, even if they worked together with the Heavenly Eye Group, the Kamiyoshi clan, and other surrounding forces, it would be difficult for them to gather a force that could block 30,000 modern soldiers. Moreover, if a fight really broke out, the Aramerican side had more than 30,000 people. When the time came, the Navy, Army, and Air Force would send out hundreds of thousands of soldiers. That would be a big problem. Rue Hui said solemnly, "Why don't we follow the original plan and assassinate their important figures? This should be the simplest and most effective method." In the beginning, Rue Hui had discussed with Ryudo and Ayam how to deal with America. The first method they thought of was assassination. Top fighters like Ryudo and Rabbitball could easily assassinate a group of America's upper echelons. Even if they could not directly kill President Eden, killing a large group of administrative personnel could greatly slow down their progress. However, Ayam shook her head and smiled. "No need to go through so much trouble. Come with me to Yokota Base in a bit. I have a way to deal with them all at once." Yokota Base? Wasn't that the largest American military base near Tokyo? And Ayam said to deal with them all at once? How should they? Hiss. No way? Thinking of this, Rue Hui and Ryudo's eyes widened as they thought of the possibility. How could they deal with the 30,000 American soldiers in their territory? At first glance, it seemed like a difficult mission, but for the current Ayam, it was not the case. Not long after, the scene cut to the Yokota Base commander's office. It was a busy scene inside. Yokota Base was located 45 kilometers west of Tokyo in Fusenko, Tama Prefecture. It covered an area of 7.3 square kilometers and was the command center of the American Air Force in Northeast Asia. It was the main combat base and air transport base. Due to the strategic importance of this base, the American Air Force headquarters in Japan was built here. The person in charge was Lieutenant General Doran John. He reported directly to the American President and the Hexagon. Lieutenant General Doran was an American with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a stubble. He was about 60 years old, but he was full of energy, as if he always had endless energy. However, this Lieutenant General was not very happy. His hat was to the side, and he had a cigar in his mouth. He did not have time to light it, and he was just pretending to be angry. However, this was to be expected. After all, Doran had been so busy these few days that he did not know if he was dreaming. "Hello? Is the aircraft carrier in Yokosuka ready? Can it move out at any time? Very good. Okinawa's defense must be done as best as possible. There are already a lot of things to do there. We must not let anything go wrong. General, the Hexagon sent a secret letter. I've contacted the Japanese interim government. They said they have no comment. Move all the soldiers and their families out of the base as soon as possible. Don't count the Japanese. Just take the American people away." At this time, Doran was holding a phone and looking at the computer in his office. There were all kinds of messy documents on the desk, as if he was working crazily with 3 heads and 6 arms. Due to the destruction of the royal family and the series of riots, the American Air Force's control over the country had reached an all-time low. The new Prime Minister refused to communicate with Doran. They seemed to be determined to clear out the American troops, and were even willing to go to war. This made Doran feel that there was something wrong with their heads. Crazy, this was crazy. From Doran's point of view, the Japanese were their domesticated dogs, who knew that when the kennel was in chaos, they would turn around and bite their masters. This was incomprehensible. The worst part was that there seemed to be two powerful forces behind this chaos: Kamiyoshi clan and Tenma group. Doran had heard of these two forces before, but he did not expect them to go to this extent. They wanted to destroy the country and fight to the death with the American Air Force. Of course, Doran was not afraid of war. As a soldier, this was his duty. Due to the recent busy work, this Lieutenant General of the American Air Force was already thinking about how to deal with the Japanese after the war. Should he try the Lee May barbecue? Or should he just ask for a few more fatties and boys? For Doran, he would never go easy on his enemies. If he really fought, it would be a bloody scene. However, from a certain perspective, this war might not even start. Asterisk knock knock. Asterisk just as Doran was looking at the documents on the table and was about to reply to the hexagon building message, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Doran said without looking up. After all, there were only his subordinates in this base. There was no possibility of outsiders coming in. However, the next second, this Lieutenant General of the American Air Force heard a cute voice that he had never heard before. "Yo, this is the office of the American Air Force's commander? It's not grand enough. It's not even as grand as my office." "Huh? Who? This voice is?" Instantly, Doran hurriedly raised his head to look at the door. Only then did he notice that a woman with a devastatingly beautiful appearance was sauntering in leisurely. Furthermore, there was another young man following behind the woman. Both of them didn't look like they were from the military base. How is this possible? How did they get in? The moment he saw the two uninvited guests, Doran immediately reached for his gun. But the woman smiled and said, "Stop, sit quietly. Stop and sit there quietly." To Lieutenant General Doran, who only took orders from President American and was second only to him, it was impossible for an unknown outsider to make him obey with just a few words. However, such an impossible thing had really happened. The moment the woman spoke, Doran felt his hand freeze in the air. Even if the gun was right in front of him, he could not touch it at all. This is like hypnosis on the spot. Too strong. Seeing Lieutenant General American frozen in place, the young man behind him could not help but sigh. The two people who suddenly came to the commander's office were Ryudo and Iam. How did the two of them sneak into this place without a sound? Of course, it was because of the Black Wing Ninja and the Guardian Ninja. Ninjas were experts in infiltration. The two groups of ninjas under Kenzaki and Amame were experts among experts. They could even sneak into a professional military base. Moreover, in order to prepare to assassinate the commander here, they already knew the situation inside the base. It would not take them much effort to escort their master in. Of course, there were limitations to assassinating. After all, it was not difficult to assassinate a few commanders, but it was impossible to assassinate an entire army of 30,000. That was why Yongji had appeared here. What she wanted was not an assassination, but a total annihilation. In front of Lieutenant General Doran, Iam walked over, waved her hand in front of his eyes, and said in a charlatan-like tone, "Next, you will do whatever I say, understand?" Iam's voice was very hoarse. It sounded like a whisper from the abyss in the dark night. In this state, Iam combined with her LV6 charm, Heavenly Devil's arrival god-level charm, naturally destroyed Doran's consciousness, causing him to fall into a daze and delirious state. He also replied in a muffled tone, "Yes, whatever you say, I will do." Wow, it's even this kind of hypnotic charm. That's ridiculous. Seeing the Lieutenant General fall into her trap, Ryudo could not help but tremble slightly. Previously, Yongji was also in a state of natural charm, but now she had reached a higher level. She had reached the point where a simple sentence could be used as a hypnosis technique. She was simply invincible. Very good. Iam nodded and smiled. Immediately gather all the American soldiers stationed in Japan and start a live broadcast of the pre-war mobilization. Make sure that all the soldiers can sit in front of the screen and watch the live broadcast. Yes, I will arrange it right away. After being ordered by Madame Yongji, Lieutenant General Dolan immediately picked up the phone and ordered his deputy on the other side of the phone to immediately carry out this unprecedented pre-war mobilization. Summoning all the American soldiers stationed in Japan to sit in front of the screen and having Lieutenant General Dolan conduct a pre-war mobilization was a little troublesome, but it was not something unacceptable. After all, the soldiers in the 80 or so bases were already prepared for war. As long as the commander gave the order, they would be able to throw themselves into the righteous war. We, the glorious American soldiers, are the messengers of justice that protect this world. When the 30,000 soldiers sat in front of the screen and waited for Lieutenant General Doran to conduct the pre-war mobilization, that was what most of them were thinking. However, strangely, after the screen flashed for a while, it was not the familiar Lieutenant General Doran that everyone was familiar with. Instead, it was an unfamiliar figure. The figure on the screen was a woman, but not a woman. This was because using a person to describe her was a bit disrespectful. She was indeed very beautiful, but it was not a matter of beauty. Instead, it was the divinity that this woman exuded that made everyone who saw her want to kneel before her. When the 30,000 soldiers were entranced by the figure on the screen, the woman on the screen showed a strange smile. Then she opened her mouth and said to everyone, "My name is Tenmu Ayam. I am also your master. Please do as I say." "Yes, master." Unknowingly, the tens of thousands of soldiers sitting in front of the screen said in unison. "Now, take out your pistols or any other weapons of mass destruction from your bodies." As soon as the woman on the screen finished speaking, the soldiers scrambled to hold their guns in their hands. Some who didn't have guns raised their grenades directly, and some even hugged the mortars at once. Next, aim the weapon at your head and prepare to fire. Whoosh! Accompanied by a series of mechanical noises, tens of thousands of soldiers aimed their pistols, submachine guns, grenades, mortars, and other weapons at their heads. They also put their hands on the triggers, bolts, and launchers. Finally, in the name of Tenmu Ayam, I order you to quickly head to paradise. Amen. Bang. The moment Yongji gave the final order, a series of explosions rang out from the 88 American bases in Japan. Today, heaven must be exceptionally busy. Chapter 399. 88 American bases, more than 30,000 soldiers, were all wiped out in an instant. The scene at that time could be said to be quite shocking. It was so shocking that others didn't know how to describe it. According to the staff of the American base in Nippon, the incident began with a video conference. I don't know what happened, but Lieutenant General Doran asked for a pre-war mobilization. All soldiers had to participate, even if they had to break their legs. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just an auntie sweeping the floor. I was sweeping the floor outside the conference hall. As I was sweeping, I heard a woman's voice. How do I describe her voice? It was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. Not long after, there was a series of gunshots and explosions from inside. I ran away at that time. Only later did I find out that everyone inside was dead. It was really terrifying. The above report came from an auntie who used to do odd jobs in a base in Japan. In addition to this auntie, many of the base's internal staff members also gave their testimonies. Terrifying, it was terrifying. Everyone seemed to have gone crazy. They suddenly pointed their guns at their own heads and killed themselves. If you ask me, they must have been possessed. Otherwise, why would so many people point their guns at their own faces? Oh, and that woman, although I didn't see her, I knew she was a beauty from her voice. Maybe a witch from hell. According to the later investigation, there were too many suspicious points in this American base madness incident. When the report was delivered to the Hexagon, everyone was stunned. That, Mr. President, this is an emergency report from Japan. When the female secretary gave the report to the president, she was completely shocked. The current president of American, Turden, was an old man with blonde hair. He liked to play the accordion, but he had a bit of Alzheimer's. He would fall down when he walked, and even lose control of his bowels. When he saw the secretary's shocked expression, he calmly smiled and said, "Oh, my dear Monica, why do you have such an expression? Is it because I didn't zip it properly? Ha ha, this is a standard, American joke." "Really? But Mr. President, take a look at this first. I'm a little presbyopic recently. Just read it to me with your sweet voice." President Turden said pretentiously as he reached his hand under the secretary's skirt. The secretary seemed to be used to this way of reporting, but she still whispered, "Well, don't be afraid of what I'm going to say next." "Oh, how can there be anything I'm afraid of? I am the president of American, the most powerful person in the world. All right. Not long ago, all 30,000 of our soldiers stationed in Japan died in the line of duty." Before he could finish his sentence, Taedong was petrified. The arrogant expression on his face froze on the spot. His hands that were frantically playing the accordion also stopped. He looked like an old cat that had been kicked in the butt by Uncle Tom's boots. "Mr. President, are you all right? There must be something wrong with my hearing. You just said that our 30,000 soldiers in Japan were all smoked eagle bows? Were they smoking something strange? They died in the line of duty, dear Mr. President. They all went to heaven and won't come back." After confirming that the secretary was not joking with him, Taedong's face suddenly became very ugly. The few muscles on his face suddenly twisted. He looked like he was crying and laughing, angry and angry. In short, he looked as awkward as he could. After holding it in for a full 5 minutes, he slowly said, "Dear Lewinsky, well, my name is Monica. Lewinsky was your secretary before the previous secretary. She is also your ex-wife. Oh, I remembered wrong. You are all so charming, and your voices are so beautiful. Do you want to come to my room tonight to report on your work? So what are you going to do about this matter now?" "What matter? All of our U.S. troops stationed in Japan were suddenly smoked. Bah! It's about dying in the line of duty." Well, this is indeed a big problem. When it came to serious matters, Taedong frowned and said helplessly, "So many soldiers died in the line of duty. The compensation must be very expensive. Do we have any left in the treasury? First of all, we have to speed up the printing of money. I don't think now is the time to talk about compensation. Is it the time to talk about coming to my room tonight to report on your work? Neither. Now the Hexagon wants you to go and preside over the war conference immediately. This is a war. I see. I'll go now." Suddenly, Taedong stood up from the chair, put on his pants, and strode out of the door. He said, "This is a war. I should preside over the war conference. This is a war. I should preside over the war conference, Mr. President. You're going the wrong way. The elevator is over there." "Okay, no problem." After turning his head and nodding to the secretary, Taedong continued to mutter, "This is a war. The elevator is over there. This is a war. The elevator is over there. Is this guy okay? How can he hold a war conference like this?" The female secretary shook her head slightly as she watched the president walk unsteadily, as if he could fall at any time. Speaking of the Hexagon, it was the place where the presidents of the United States used for wartime command. In fact, not long ago, the Hexagon had entered a state of full readiness for war. Even if one looked inside from the outside, they could see countless figures flashing inside. Is there still no news from Nippon? The missile launch force is ready at any time. Be ready to contact the leaders of other allies at any time and ask them to provide support. Is there really going to be a war? We don't even know what's going on. It's because we don't know what's going on that it's scary. 30,000 people are gone. Yeah, I don't know how Nippon did it. It's ridiculous. At this moment, the staff in the Hexagon complained as they worked. Because what happened today was too strange, and because it happened in 88 bases at once, the news was immediately reported to the top through various channels. It didn't take long for almost everyone in the Hexagon to know that 30,000 soldiers had disappeared from the Nippon base. It was like watching a disaster movie. Therefore, the three commanders of the United States Navy, Army, and Air Force, as well as the staff officers and generals, were discussing wildly in the War Hall. Although it was called the War Hall, it was filled with all kinds of computers, televisions, and some unknown machines. While staying in this place, the president could command the U.S. Navy, Army, and Air Force. If necessary, he could even launch nuclear weapons at any time. Just then, Taedong walked in slowly. He looked at the busy people inside and raised his hand with a smile. "Good afternoon, everyone. Do you want some dessert? I know a hotel that has delicious donuts." "Mr. President, stop joking. Come sit down." Before he could finish his sentence, a staff member pulled him to the seat of honor and quickly placed a diaper under his butt. If the president sat down for too long, he would need a diaper to prevent embarrassing accidents. Therefore, the diaper in the hexagon was the guardian of America, guarding the last dignity of America. Seeing that the president had already taken his seat, the generals next to him also sat around the table, wanting to see what instructions Taedong had for him. After a few seconds, Taedong said in a deep voice, "Everyone, this is a war." Hearing this, the surrounding generals nodded one after another. After all, they thought so too. The death of 30,000 American soldiers was no small matter. After all, with so many soldiers dead, how much compensation would they have to pay? Wasn't this killing them? However, Taedong's next sentence changed the topic and said seriously, "This is a war. The elevator is over there." "What? Mr. President? What did you say?" "The elevator. The elevator is over there." Once the words came out, everyone was shocked. The generals all looked at the president as if they saw a ghost. They couldn't understand what he was talking about. But among them, there were some who were smarter and seemed to understand the meaning behind the president's words. Elevator? Was the president referring to the Elevator Research Institute? In the entire American country, there were all kinds of secret research institutes. One of the most special institutes was called the Elevator Research Institute. Of course, despite the name, they didn't research elevators, but aliens. This was not a joke. They really did research on aliens, and there was a living alien creature in the institute. The alien creature looked like a giant gorilla, but it was not a gorilla in nature. It was an alien monster that was much more violent and powerful. It was said that the alien creature fell into America with a meteor shower a few decades ago. Scientists had been secretly studying it in the Elevator Research Institute. Because they were afraid that the gorilla would attack people, the scientists had been using high-concentration liquid nitrogen to freeze it, keeping it in a half-dead state. But if one day America was seriously threatened, then they would unfreeze the alien gorilla and send it to fight the monster that was about to destroy the world. Don't ask why they thought the alien gorilla would fight for America. The answer was that it was always like this in the movies. After thinking about this, the Army commander couldn't help but frown. "Mr. President, do we really need to use the elevator? That thing is not a small risk, and it could lead to even greater damage." Suddenly, the Navy commander next to him sighed. But this time the enemy killed 30,000 people in an instant. This is definitely not human power. Our soldiers shouldn't be able to do anything about it. Why are you so sure that the soldiers can't do anything about it? Because that's how it is in the movies, right? Whenever we encounter a powerful enemy that can destroy the world, our American soldiers are always just background characters. Because the Navy commander's words were so reasonable, the people around him were speechless. So the Air Force commander once again looked at the great president and asked again, "Mr. President, do we really need to use the elevator? I think we can still use conventional forces to fight." Hearing this, Taedong waved his hand and said firmly, "Elevator, we have to use the elevator." What he meant by this sentence was, if we don't use the elevator and take the stairs, how tiring would it be? What if I fall down again? From beginning to end, the president's brain seemed to be in a different dimension from the other generals, and it felt like a chicken talking to a duck. However, before they could finish their discussion, another urgent report was sent to them. "Mr. President, not good. Some videos have begun to spread crazily in our local military camps. People who have seen the videos have all pulled out their guns and committed suicide. It's exactly the same as the situation at the base in Nippon. What? When they heard the sudden emergency report, everyone, except for Turden, was shocked. Then, they contacted the military headquarters they belonged to. What? More than 1,000 people committed suicide in 10 minutes. How did those videos come about? What? It was hacked into the TV system. It was played on the TV in the military camp. Order all TVs to be turned off immediately. Cut off the network and confiscate the soldiers' mobile phones. What? If everything is banned, there will be no way to fight? Is this the time to say this? So many people died. You pay for the compensation. For a time, the entire hexagon was in chaos. The strange phenomenon of American suicides had spread to the American mainland. If this continued, in a few days, the country's defense forces would be completely destroyed. This was not a war, but it was more like a war. The generals present had never experienced such a terrible war. They didn't even know what the enemy looked like, and they were already defeated. Only then did they look at the old man sitting high in the president's seat. So that's why the president said he wanted to use the alien gorilla in the elevator. As soon as he came up, as expected of the great Mr. President of the American Empire, he is so far-sighted, and we are the short-sighted ones. In such a muddled situation, President Biden signed the order to release the alien gorilla in the Elevator Research Institute. Chapter 400. From a certain perspective, releasing the alien gorilla could be said to be a smart and stupid decision. Smart was smart, but American didn't seem to have any way to fight against the mysterious video suicide attack. If they released the alien gorilla to fight with the enemy, they didn't need to pay compensation. It was the perfect warrior for American. But stupidity lies in the fact that the released alien gorilla might not necessarily do things according to their ideas. That afternoon, in American's Elevator Research Institute, a few scientists in white coats walked toward a small room in the innermost part of the institute with a large pile of materials and equipment. All of them looked serious, as if they were preparing for a very complicated research. Indeed, the research was very complicated because they were trying to figure out how to release the alien gorilla and control it. As they walked, a young researcher couldn't help but ask, "Director, do you think we can successfully control that guy? It's not a matter of whether we can or not, but we must succeed. Otherwise, the higher-ups won't let us go." The director walked forward with firm steps while shaking his head slightly. Ever since the establishment of this Elevator Research Institute, all the researchers inside had no way out. In the past few decades, American had allocated at least $10 billion to this research institute in order to create an alien warrior that could serve the country at the last moment. Now that President Turden had ordered the director to release the alien warrior to fight for the country, the director couldn't say no. If the director said no, then there was a high probability that his life would end at that moment. After all, the tens of billions of dollars of funding were not taken for free. Moreover, more than half of it had been pocketed by the previous directors and researchers. Therefore, the director of this generation was very unlucky. He had to bear the burden of $10 billion for all his predecessors. But it didn't matter. There would always be a way when the car reached the mountain. With the providence of America, aliens, and whatnot will naturally become a powerful helper for us. Where did the director's confidence come from? Because it was always like this in movies. Therefore, the director of the Elevator Research Institute led a group of researchers to the Research Institute where the alien gorilla was frozen. They were ready to unfreeze it. It's really a monster. It won't eat us when it comes out, right? Looking at the black figure frozen in the huge ice block, one of the researchers couldn't help but complain. It shouldn't. Maybe this alien creature is very friendly? What's more, it's been living here for decades, so it should at least pay some rent. He didn't know if he was joking or just trying to numb himself, but the director sighed and pressed the unfreeze button. In everyone's opinion, the unfreezing plan of the Elevator Research Institute couldn't fail this time. The alien gorilla should have calmed down after a period of chaos. It would accept the command of the American government and fight the evil enemy outside. However, when the gorilla opened its blood-red eyes, everyone in the Research Institute finally reacted. This guy didn't seem to be as easy to talk to as in the movies. Instead, he was a real monster. In this way, a week later, the Air American was destroyed. It was not a joke or any exaggeration to describe this sentence. It was the truth. The violent alien warrior that rushed out of the Elevator Research Institute killed all the researchers in the institute. It then rushed out of the suburbs and killed everyone in sight. When Ryudo, Ruehue, and I.M. saw the video sent by American, the three of them had a strange expression. At this time on the big screen, a strange-looking big red guy was rushing toward the hexagon with great speed. As the red figure rushed in, the supposedly indestructible building instantly collapsed. A large number of staff became non-recyclable garbage along with the scattered debris of the building. A week, only a short 7 days. The monster slaughtered its way from the south to the north, then from the north to the west, then from the west to the east, slaughtering the entire country. From the video, it could be seen that the so-called modern weapons were useless against the monster. Bullets were like tickles to it and had no effect at all. Bombs, cannonballs, missiles, and other things could be fired and hit it head-on. Not even a strand of hair would be lost. What about the alien warrior? Its jumping ability was enough to jump from the ground and grab the wings of fighter jets and tear them apart. It could also clash with hundreds of tanks on the ground and knock them all to the ground. Even the aircraft carrier of the American Navy, which weighed more than 100,000 tons, was completely destroyed by its own flesh and blood. This level of combat power scared a lot of American generals and soldiers away. After all, no one wanted to die in front of this alien creature. Thus, in just a few days, the American army was completely routed. A large number of soldiers fled in all kinds of vehicles, and the civilians followed them to the neighboring countries in the south. President Turden was scared to death because of a heart attack. The entire country was finished. Just like that, I.M. and the others' strongest enemies self-destructed in just a week. The culprit was an alien creature. For a moment, I don't know what to say. What's going on with this world? After watching the video from the other side, we couldn't help but rub her head and complain in a helpless tone. In Huey's eyes, the world she lived in was quite normal. But ever since Ryudo appeared, the world seemed to have become more and more abnormal. Now it was abnormal to the extreme. Even aliens came out. It was like the content of a third-rate novel. I.M. smiled. The world is abnormal to begin with. It's just that all the abnormalities before were hidden under the surface, and no one noticed. Okay, I know you've seen through it. What should we do now? That alien creature isn't something that can be easily dealt with. From the previous video, the alien gorilla's combat power was basically equivalent to Superman in comics. Its body was invulnerable. Any modern weapon was like scratching an itch. It was almost useless. For example, American's army was already considered the strongest in the world, but it was still terrifyingly weak in front of power far beyond human imagination. After all, the army was used to deal with humans, not an alien. The result of doing so was usually suicide. And Hui knew that the armed forces on her side were not even as strong as American's army. It was basically impossible to deal with the monkey. Of course, this was just a fantasy from a normal point of view. For the other two, Ryudo and I.M., it was not impossible to deal with that guy. Alien. If that guy was an alien, would that special skill have any effect on it? Since the moment Ryudo saw the video, he kept thinking in his mind. Logically speaking, aliens were invincible in this world, but in Ryudo's Krypton shopping mall, there was a skill that specifically targeted aliens. And the name of the skill was One-Hit Kill Technique, specifically targeted aliens. In fact, when Ryudo saw this strange skill, he wanted to complain. What the hell is this? A skill specifically targeted at aliens? This skill is too creative. How did it come up with this? Was there really any use for it? However, reality told him that it really could be used. You can't say that aliens don't exist just because you haven't seen them with your own eyes. Look, aren't the aliens here? This is not a movie or a game. This is a real alien landing. And the description of the one-hit kill technique specifically targeted aliens was, after learning it, you can kill any alien that comes to Earth in one hit. In other words, as long as Ryudo bought this skill, he could kill the alien gorilla on the spot. However, there was obviously a small problem in this. That was, the price of this one-hit kill technique specifically targeted aliens was $1 trillion. It wasn't $1 trillion or $100 million. It was $1 trillion. 1 trillion equals 1 trillion. 1 trillion equals 1 trillion. 1 trillion equals 1 trillion. 1 trillion. God knows how many zeros there were. It was truly an astronomical number. But if he had this money, Ryudo was confident that he could kill the alien gorilla. How were they going to ask for $1 trillion? No, even if he asked, where would Rue Hui and Iam find this trillion? Such a large amount of money. Even if it was the Kamiyoshi and the Tenma group that had occupied all of Nippon, it was difficult to come up with it at once. Just as Ryudo was worrying about this large amount of money, Iam on the side looked at him. What? Are you worried about how to get the trillion? Yeah, such a large amount of money. How do I, The moment he heard Iam's words, Ryudo was taken aback at first. Then his eyes widened suddenly. What's going on? Why would Iam? Hiss. No way. After Iam pointed out this number, Ryudo suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his mind, and many things that could not be explained before also made sense. In fact, when Ryudo transmigrated to this world, he felt that this world was very strange. Or, mainly, Iam was very strange. Her behavior and words were very different from the Tenmu Iam that Ryudo knew. The most important thing was that this Iam was too strong. How strong was she? So strong that she seemed to be able to see the future. So strong that she seemed to be able to see through everyone's inner world. So strong that she could easily kill the most powerful enemy. This Iam was very different from the original her in the game. In addition, she actually knew the number trillion that normal people could not imagine, which could only mean one thing, and that was, Iam also had the same system as him. Only this answer could explain where all these changes came from, and only this answer could explain all the drastic changes in this world. Suddenly, Ryudo could not help but ask, Iam, you also? Sure, some things are better known. Maintaining a little mystery is the secret to a woman's beauty. Without waiting for Ryudo to finish, Iam put her finger on her red lips and smiled at him. Indeed, Iam had always been mysterious, but she especially wanted to see Ryudo's surprised expression now, so she casually said the number. Because she also had the system, Iam naturally knew the one-hit kill technique for aliens, and she immediately realized that the skill could solve the current problem. It was just that now Iam was facing the same problem as Mr. Long. That was, how to raise the trillion as soon as possible. With such a large amount of money, it is not enough to gather all the cash on hand, even if the entire national treasury is emptied. Wait, national treasury? No bank? Right. There is still this way. It had to be said that Yongji's resourcefulness was relatively high. When faced with this kind of money problem, she immediately thought of a solution. Rue Hui, now the Bank of Japan is under your jurisdiction, right? Yes, what's wrong? Now we have a way to deal with the alien, but it requires a lot of money. A lot of money? Is it a lot of money that we can't take out? It is indeed difficult to take out. The total amount is 1 trillion. Hiss. 1 trillion. The moment she heard this unit, Rue Hui couldn't help but frown. After all, she had never mobilized such a large amount of money in her life. The entire annual government budget of Japan was only 10 trillion, which was only 1% of 1 trillion. So Rue Hui covered her forehead and said, such a large amount of money. Even if the bank prints the money on the spot, it will take a long time. The monster is coming soon. Can we really make it? Based on the current observation of the alien gorilla, it seemed to be crossing the Pacific Ocean and would soon come to Asia. Unexpectedly, at this moment, I.M. smiled and said, "It doesn't take long. In fact, just one bill will do." "One bill? One what?" "A bill with 1 trillion written on it. Then deposit it into the bank account, and the problem is solved." Having said that, I.M. turned her head and smiled at the dumbfounded Ryudo, and a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. Chapter 4:01. Although Ryudo had been using the system to shop, there was one thing he didn't understand, and that was the nature of money. However, this problem was a bit complicated, and involved a lot of messy content. In essence, money was a special commodity that served as a general equivalent. It was used as a medium of exchange, a tool to store value, and a unit of account. It was a material and symbolic appendage of people's commodity values. Therefore, from this point of view, the currency issued by the country itself had no value. That was to say, whether it was 1 yuan, 100 yuan, 10,000 yuan, 100 million yuan, or 1 trillion yuan, the country could issue as much money as it wanted. The number itself was just a number, and it didn't represent any actual value. What really made money valuable was the gross domestic product of the country that issued the currency, as well as national power endorsement, national credit, and other extremely complicated factors. It would be boring to explain them one by one. I.M. herself was not an expert in economics, but she knew one thing very well. That was, her so-called pay-to-win system actually had serious loopholes. First of all, in the black technology system owned by Ryudo and I.M., all transactions were completed in the currency of their current country, and the price of the goods used for transactions was set from the beginning, and there would be no fluctuations in the later stages. For example, a skill book was sold for 1 million yuan, a black technology gun was sold for 10 million yuan, a super bulletproof vest was sold for 100 million yuan, or a monster-level skill, like Alien One-Hit Kill, was sold for 1 trillion yuan, and so on. These things were sold for as much money as they were sold. It was that honest. But the problem was that the system only determined how much money the buyer spent, but it didn't determine how much purchasing power the money had at this moment. A simple example was if the Bank of Japan issued 1 trillion yuan at a time and let it flow into the market. Then these currencies would cause the amount of currency circulating in a country to exceed the total effective economic output of the country, causing the price of all goods to skyrocket. Before the issuance of this trillion yuan, a cabbage might sell for 100 yuan. After the issuance, a cabbage might sell for 100 million yuan. So at this time, although people seemed to have more money in their hands, their purchasing power didn't change, and it even decreased. The result of this was that more money could only buy less things. This was the principle of inflation. Fortunately, this situation had nothing to do with the goods in the Krypton shopping mall. The system's shopping mall could be seen as an ideal supermarket that would never experience inflation. The prices would always be constant, and there would always be a stable supply of goods. No matter how much money Ryudo had, he could use it to buy things in the Krypton Mall. When a cabbage was sold for 100 yuan, a plane in the mall was sold for 100 million yuan. When a cabbage was sold for 100 million yuan, the planes in the mall were still sold for 100 million yuan. Considering this, and the fact that Rue Hui now had control of the Bank of Japan, which was responsible for issuing currency, she could control the face value and quantity of the currency at will. Hence, I.M. came up with this seemingly nonsensical idea, to issue 1 trillion in currency. After this 1 trillion currency was issued, regardless of whether it had purchasing power or not, as long as it was in the hands of Ryudo and I.M., the system would recognize it. In other words, the two of them could use almost worthless currency to exchange for valuable living creatures in the system. So that's how it is. It can be played like this. It's basically freeloading the system. After hearing Yongji's explanation, Longdo suddenly slapped his forehead, and he couldn't help but feel like his horizons had been broadened. When he used the system before, he only thought of an equivalent exchange. The system would give him the same amount of money he gave the system, who knew that Ayam had no intention of making an equivalent exchange with the system. She even wanted to freeload. If there were no loopholes in Ayam's way of playing, then the Krypton shopping mall would become a permanent $0 supermarket for the two of them. After all, with the right to mint the currency, Rui Hui only needed to madly issue currency that had no real value and was only for Ryudo and Ayam to use. They could buy whatever they wanted. This kind of currency could be printed with 1 trillion, and the number of zeros behind the bill was more than the hell money. Such a ridiculous currency would definitely not be used in the normal market. It would only be treated as a lunatic who came to cause trouble, but it could be used in the system. Although this currency sounded ridiculous, this currency was produced through the proper channels. It was the currency recognized by the system, so it could be bought and sold in the Krypton shopping mall. Therefore, if one were to consider it from this perspective, the so-called one-hit killing technique for aliens of 1 trillion yuan was simply a waste of money. Even the entire Krypton shopping mall was a waste. Good heavens! This woman's brain was indeed abnormal. Thinking of this, Ryudo could not help but sigh deeply. He was extremely impressed by Ayam's imagination. Using currency to freeload the system, could a normal transmigrator do something like this? He couldn't do it. At the very least, Long Do himself couldn't think of such a shameless move. It was simply inhumane. Oh system, my pitiful, conscientious system. Since the birth of every main character who transmigrated with the system, who did not worship the system as a god. However, in the eyes of Ayam, there was no such thing as a god in the world, because she, the sixth sky demon, was the god of this world. Just like this, when Ayam's strategy was decided, Rui Hui immediately followed her plan and carried out this system freeloading operation. First, Rui Hui found the Bank of Japan responsible for issuing currency. Although most of the functions of the bank had been suspended, the authority to issue currency was still there. However, when he heard the request of this person, the person in charge of the bank was obviously stunned. Rui Hui-sama, your request is 1 trillion. In short, you just have to produce this banknote and put it in the normal issuance sequence. You don't have to care about the rest. Yes. Although he did not know what these people wanted to do, the person in charge of the Bank of Japan could only do as they were told. After all, this country was now Rui Hui and Ayam's territory. The two were basically at the point where they could control everything. However, because the bank did not have this strange banknote template, they had to design, mold, and print it overnight. 2 days later, the banknote with an unknown number of zeros was finally released. Very good. It's starting. After holding the banknote in his hand, Ryudo gulped and then opened his personal attribute page. As expected, when he held the banknote, Ryudo's personal assets were displayed as 104.7 billion inch. This amount could be said to be chaotic to the extreme. It did not look like a normal monetary unit at all. But even so, Ryudo quickly opened the skill store and found the most expensive skill. It was as if it was not intended for anyone to buy at all. One-hit killing technique specifically for aliens. Purchase of one-hit killing technique specifically for aliens requires 100 billion. Confirm payment? Confirm payment. Just when Ryudo clicked on the word yes on the screen, he only felt his heart in his throat. But fortunately, after he clicked on it, the large amount of money in his personal assets was instantly cleared, and a strange skill with a very long name appeared in the skill bar. One-hit killing technique specifically for aliens. After learning it, you can be killed by the aliens who come to the Earth. How is it? Did you buy it? Seeing Ryudo looking at his hands, Ayam on the side asked with a smile. But this skill seems strange. After nodding, Ryudo pointed directly at the wall next to him. An array of light that looked like a translucent cube shot out from his fingertips. This scene looked like a laser with a finger, but after the light gathered by the translucent cube shot out, it did not cause any damage to the wall. Strange, very strange. As described in the skill, this skill was estimated to be a special skill for aliens. Other than that, it couldn't even kill an ant. Selling it at such a high price was simply outrageous. But if there was really an alien in front of him, then the meaning of this skill was different. The gorilla seems to be in the Pacific Ocean. I'll go meet it. After confirming that he had obtained this special skill, Ryudo looked up at the sea in the distance. His world seemed to have crossed the coast, and he looked at the figure that was flying here from thousands of kilometers away. Indeed, this kind of thing was more or less a little strange. It was hard to imagine that a living creature could fly across the Pacific Ocean to Asia from America, where the Air American was located. After all, the Pacific Ocean was the largest ocean in the world, with an area of about 1/3 of the total area of the Earth, and a horizontal length of nearly 20,000 kilometers from east to west. Even the most powerful bird or fish couldn't fly across such a long area. Of course, from a certain point of view, the alien creature wasn't flying toward them. Instead, it was running toward them. Yes, running. It was running crazily on the endless sea, using its strength to explain the words, running with the wind. Freedom is the direction. If at this time, looking at the middle of the Pacific Ocean through satellite surveillance, the figure running crazily with storms and tsunamis wouldn't be seen. On the surface, the red muscular gorilla didn't look much different from an ordinary gorilla, except that it looked a little stronger. But at this time, it was swinging its slender arms and running directly on the sea. The sea couldn't be relayed. Logically, it should sink to the bottom of the sea when it stepped on the water. But this gorilla's running speed was too fast, really too fast. Before one of its feet sank, it lifted the other foot and moved forward, and it continued this running process repeatedly, so it didn't fall into the sea at all. Based on the few surveillance cameras, the alien monster ran at an astonishing speed of hundreds of meters per second, faster than a supersonic plane. Voila, voila la la la. Under this super speed, the alien monster ran crazily on the sea. Tornadoes continued to sweep the sky around it, and tsunamis continued to come from the sea below. With his own strength, he was able to create such a level of change in the heavens and earth. Even if he only saw the figure of this monkey from a distance, Ryudo had decided that this guy was indeed not an enemy that humans could fight against. Dragon, Ryudo, do you want to get closer? Is it already very dangerous? Just as Ryudo was observing the gorilla's movements from a distance, the supersonic jet pilot sitting in front said in a trembling tone. Before this, many countries have sent special teams to observe this gorilla, but almost all of them were shot down on the spot after being discovered. Within a radius of 10,000 meters, those who approached died without a burial place. Although the alien monster didn't say anything, its actions obviously carried out this sentence. After hearing the pilot's words, Longdo nodded slightly and said with a smile, "All right, you can go back first. Leave the rest to me." "Ah, I go back first? Then you." Before he finished speaking, Ryudo actually opened the cockpit door of the supersonic jet. He rushed directly toward the sea below. What? When the pilot saw his actions, his scalp suddenly tingled with fear. At the same time, Ryudo, who was descending from a height of thousands of meters, took a deep breath and shouted into the distance, "Hey, smelly monkey, get over here." When he took this breath, Ryudo's entire body seemed to expand, and his voice was like a huge sonic boom that blasted toward the alien monster that was running wildly not far away. Although it didn't understand what the guy was saying at all, the alien monster obviously understood the provocation in this sentence. Huh? So at that moment, its eyes that exuded a bright red luster, as if they were continuously filled with blood, suddenly glanced at the tiny human not far away and immediately rushed over here. Fast, it was not as simple as fast. The distance between the two sides was more than 1,000 meters, but before Ryudo's body landed, a red light rushed directly toward his body. It was almost too late for him to react. But fortunately, Ryudo had already been prepared for its speed, and with the power of LV5 insight, he could roughly grasp the guy's movements. "Smelly monkey, go to hell." When the alien monster was about to open its bloody mouth and swallow Ryudo's body into its stomach at the last moment, Dragon Fight pointed his finger at the alien's body and used the special skill he had just acquired. It was a one-hit kill technique that was used against aliens. Chapter 402. A catastrophe that could have led to the destruction of the world was turned into nothingness by that seemingly light finger. The system didn't lie. The so-called one-hit kill against aliens wasn't fake either. Under Ryudo's finger, the huge gorilla turned into dust and scattered in the ocean. What happened after that was very simple. As the superhero who saved the world, Ryudo gained great fame and popularity all over the world. Then Ayam and Ruehui made full use of this superhero's flag and annexed the entire American country and the surrounding America. Now that Yongji had such a large territory, and with the system's freeloading method discovered by Yongji, many well-equipped and loyal troops began to appear. Within a month, Yongji and Ruehui had taken over a third of the world's countries and named their territory the Tianmu country. 3 months later, more than half of the countries declared their surrender and took the initiative to join the territory of Tianmu. In less than half a year, Tianmu reached a peace agreement with the largest existing country, Chi Dragon. The two sides formed the Sky Dragon Alliance, the largest organization in history. Not long after, under the crushing force of the Sky Dragon Alliance, the world was unified and a new era of humans began. In this world, there were no more wars between countries. Everyone used technology, knowledge, and effort in the right direction. Our goal is the Sea of Stars. At this time, someone suggested, for Ryudo and the others who were enjoying the sunshine and beaches in Hawaii, exploring the vast unknown was obviously a very challenging thing. Speaking of which, our space jump ship is almost done, right? Built with those system materials of yours. In the morning, Ruehui, who was wearing a bikini swimsuit and sunglasses, leisurely laid on a beach chair and asked Ayam next to her, "Yeah, but I don't care about these things recently. The large parasite in my stomach is too annoying." Ayam, who was lying at the side, curled her lips slightly. She first looked at Ruehui, then at her own stomach. At this time, because the two beauties lying on the beach were wearing split swimsuits, their bulging bellies could be said to be quite conspicuous. It was obvious at a glance what kind of life they were in. Ruehui Kamishiro was currently 7 months pregnant. Tenmu Ayam was 8 months pregnant. Because of their pregnancy, the two leaders of the Sky Dragon Alliance had already let go of their responsibilities and handed over the work to the managers of Chi Dragon. Just as Ruehui and Ayam were enjoying a leisurely vacation before giving birth, 2 more figures appeared behind them. "Lady Ayam, Lady Ruehui, are you feeling unwell today?" Ryudo and Lin Hua also ran to the beach in swimsuits. Ryudo was also holding a large plate in his hand. On the plate were fruits and drinks, and he looked like a porter. However, when she saw the hickeys on Lin Hua's neck, Ayam laughed and said, "You took advantage of my pregnancy with Ruehui. You really did well." After being laughed at by Ayam, Lin Hua frowned slightly and said, "I am also a victim. It was Lady Ayam who drugged my wine, right?" "Ah, sorry, I was the one who drugged you. Lady Ruehui." "You. Don't call me Lady Ruehui. We are sisters now, aren't we? Sister Lin Hua, before Ayam and I unload the goods, we will have to rely on you to serve Ryudo Kuen." Speaking of this, Ruehui winked at Lin Hua. The feminine charm she exuded made Lin Hua unconsciously lick her lips. "Ruehui. Sister Ruehui. Hee. After Sister Ruehui gives birth, I must let her use a whip. Hee. Lin Hua did not know when it started, but she was also infatuated with Ruehui. She always followed behind her, and Ryudo was like an accessory. From a certain point of view, the relationships in his harem were messy enough. Lin Hua liked Ayam and Ruehui. Ayam liked Ruehui and Ryudo. Ruehui liked Ryudo and Ayam. and Ryudo liked all of them. Phew, forget it, as long as they are happy. But no matter what, nothing was more important than the harmony of his harem. If the relationships were messy, then so be it. After all, Ryudo was not the one who was at a disadvantage. In this leisurely atmosphere not long after, Ryudo's son and daughter were born one after another. Just like the previous one, Rue Hui gave birth to a daughter. Her eyes and brows looked bright and full of life. She had the genes of a Kamishiro family. On the other hand, Ayam gave birth to a boy. The moment he was born, he looked ferocious, like the birth of a demon king. After his children were born, Ryudo requested that they follow their ancestor's surname and change it to Lee. This was because Ryudo's real name was Lilan. Or rather, he was called Lilan in his previous life. Lilan. What a strange name. Are you from the Dragon Nation? I'm not in this life, but I was in my previous life. It's better to acknowledge my ancestors. It doesn't matter. You can call them whatever you like. Fortunately, Rue Hui and Ayam were not people who would care about such trivial matters. So Ryudo named his children Li Fugue and Li Ping'an. It had to be said that this name was so old-fashioned that it was reminiscent of returning to one's ancestors. When it reached the extreme, it became tide. When tide reached the extreme, it became soil. However, the scene of Ayam holding Fugue and Rue Hui holding Ping looked like a battle between Guan Yu and Qin Xiong. It was quite amusing. In this joyous atmosphere, the space jump program developed by the Science Department of the Sky Dragon Alliance had reached the stage of clinical trials. Originally, the Science Department wanted to create a spaceship that could travel through space jump. But before that, they had to test the function of this space jump. What would happen if this thing's space jump failed? When everyone gathered in the huge lab and looked at the circular space jump device in front of them, Rue Hui, who was holding her child, could not help but ask. In the hand of Rue Hui's child, Ping-an, was holding a golden lock engraved with the Kamiyoshi mark. It was a custom in Chi Dragon to give a newborn child a golden lock, and the mark engraved on it was the family mark of the mother, Rue Hui. If the space jump fails, it is possible to be teleported to a different dimension. No one knows where it will go. It is a very dangerous situation. At this time, Ryudo, who was standing next to Rue Hui, couldn't help but explain while reaching out and patting his daughter's head. But teleporting to a different dimension. That sounded familiar. Looking at the circular space jump machine in front of him, Ryudo smiled slightly and remembered the scene when he traveled through space. At that time, it was like a flash of lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in this world. What if I use this machine? Do I have a chance to jump back? Just as Ryudo was thinking about this, the machine had also entered the state of activation. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Buzz, 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 buzz. With a flash of strong light, the machine in front of them made a violent explosion and began to rotate at a high speed. Just as everyone's eyes were looking at the rotating machine, the daughter in Rue Hui's arms suddenly smirked, grabbed the golden lock on her chest, and threw it into the machine. That's... Before Ryudo and the others could react, the golden lock engraved with Kanzaki's mark flew into the machine and disappeared with a burst of strong light. As for the camera that was originally placed in the center of the machine and was about to be transferred to a certain point, it was already distorted into a pile of indescribable garbage. It seems to have failed. But where did the golden lock go? The scientists in charge of the research checked the machine, then reached out and scratched their heads with a puzzled look. However, just as Ryudo and the others were studying how to go to the Sea of Stars, under the control of the space jump device, this special golden lock crossed the distant space and appeared in the garden of a building with the words Headquarters of the Dragon Group hanging on it. At this time in the garden, a mature woman with long brown hair, who looked full of femininity, was holding the hand of a 2-year-old boy and walking in the garden. Mommy, what is that? As they walked, the little boy saw the golden lock that fell in the garden. Then he picked it up casually. Don't randomly pick up things. This is? Suddenly, The beautiful woman, Yunyen Sukudri, took the golden lock from her son's hand, then showed a puzzled expression. The golden lock had the mark of the Kamiyoshi clan, which she naturally knew. But other than the mark, there were two strange words engraved on it: peace. The golden lock of the Kamiyoshi clan. Why was it engraved with peace? Wasn't it Dragon Mark and Phoenix Cry? Yunyen Sukudri had seen similar golden locks many times when her son was young, and the twins of the colored glaze sisters, who were also given to them by Ryudo. Not long ago, the colored glaze successfully gave birth to a bunch of twins, and Ryudo happily named them a dragon and a phoenix, which meant that the dragon and the phoenix were auspicious, and gave them a pair of golden locks. Thinking of this, Yunyen Sukudri brought her son to the inner room not far away, where the colored glaze was busy feeding the siblings. After giving birth to the twins, the colored glaze looked more mature than before, although she was still far from Yunyen in certain areas. She looked decent and had some scale. Colored glaze, did you drop this golden lock? After entering the door, Yunyen Sukudri handed over the golden lock that she picked up from the garden. Golden lock? This is the mark of the Kamiyoshi clan? The colored glaze took a look at it, then took the golden locks from the twins beside her to compare, and found that they were exactly the same. The design and shape of the three golden locks were exactly the same, but the names engraved on them were different. That's strange. This golden lock was specially made by Ryudo. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be an extra piece. Dunya hasn't even given birth yet. Suddenly, colored glaze couldn't help but frown as different thoughts appeared in her mind. After his and Yunyen's children were born, Ryudo made such golden locks for their children one by one. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any extra locks. Unless that guy had someone on the outside, or even an illegitimate child. It shouldn't be that bad, right? Ryudo didn't have much contact with women outside, and when he went out to work, my mother would always keep an eye on him. I must be thinking too much, or maybe it was just a coincidence. After shaking her head, colored glaze tossed the thought of Ryudo having someone on the outside out of her mind. After all, even if she didn't believe in Ryudo, her husband, she had to believe in her mother, Rue Hue. Since colored glaze became pregnant, most of her work was handed over to Rue Hue. Recently, Rue Hue was also very busy, although it seemed that she was very busy. Therefore, at this time, Ryudo, Rue Hue, and Dunya were on a business trip to American. On the way to negotiate with the president, it was naturally impossible for them to have any romantic relationship. As for Dunya, she was just pregnant for less than a month, so it was a bit too early to make this kind of golden lock. Forget it. I'll ask Ryudo when he comes back, if he dares to lie. Humph. Thinking of this, colored glaze reached out and touched the twins' little heads while sighing slightly. When colored glaze thought of this, on a private plane in the distant sky, Ryudo, who was wearing a suit, couldn't help but sneeze. Achoo! Who is cursing me? It can't be her, right? Cursing while dreaming? After sneezing, Ryudo pouted and looked at Dunya, who was wrapped in the quilt and sleeping on the side. Since this bear lowly knew that she was pregnant, her sleeping time became especially long every day. According to her, she needed to store energy for the babies in her belly and strive to give birth to 3 babies at once. Yunyen gave birth to 1, colored glaze gave birth to 2. I must be triplets, humph. Before this, Dunya had made this kind of outburst. Who knew if her small belly could hold so many little bears? Are you asleep, Dunya? And just after Ryudo sneezed, another mature figure came to his side with a burst of fragrance. Although more than 2 years had passed since Ryudo's wedding, the current Rue Hui looked even younger. Her face was rosy, her skin was smooth, and there wasn't a single wrinkle on her face. It was hard to imagine that she was actually a grandmother. This girl has to sleep 14 hours a day. Let her be. Ryudo sighed slightly and looked at Rue Hui beside him. Ever since the Heavenly Eye group was disbanded, everything in this world changed. Ryudo went from a poor family to a big shot who could lead a country. And he also had a few cute wives and a few cute children. But as the saying went, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. After having so many things, the corresponding pressure came one after another, which made Ryudo feel quite tired from time to time. But how should he put it? This was life. The kind of lucky person who had the ability and power to rule the world, but was lying on the beach every day with a few beauties around him, and didn't have to do anything probably didn't exist. If there was... Ryudo would definitely curse him. Curse him for giving birth to children without assholes. Speaking of which, there shouldn't be such a person in the world, right? Suddenly, Ryudo smiled and looked at the distant sea of clouds outside the plane. At the same time, in another world, Ryudo, who was hugging Rue Hui and Ayam on the beach, also smiled and looked at the plane that happened to fly over their heads. End of book that you're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.